Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto has Sand Village inheritance. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by DarkSwordMage, link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Naruto. Sand and swirls. The night the Kyuubi attacked, I lost everything. Her name is Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, though only a few recognize her relationship to the late 4th Hokage Minato Namikaze. The night her son was born, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the nine-tailed demon fox which until that point had been sealed inside her body, was ripped from her and manipulated by a mysterious man. Her husband sacrificed himself to seal the demon into their newborn baby, Naruto. Kushina nearly died that night during childbirth, though thanks to efforts of the San and Tsunade, she miraculously was able to survive the loss of the Bijuu and managed to pull through. Not that it matters to the village. That bastard Sarutobi wouldn't recognize our relationship to Minato, and any proof of my marriage to Minato was destroyed when the Kyuubi destroyed our home. All of Minato's scrolls, all of the jutsu he'd created destroyed. Fortunately, Minato had a life insurance policy and we hadn't yet had the time to change the beneficiary names, so the policies paid out to me Kushina Uzumaki, the only benefit of the village not recognizing my marriage to him. With that I was able to put the leaf behind me. I left and returned to the whirlpool, my former home, to find it gone, wiped off the face of the map by an earthquake caused during the Kyuubi's rampage. Fortunately, after she left, the Leaf Tsunade and her assistant traveled with her for a time, helping her with Naruto until she could find a place to stay. Ultimately that place became the village hidden in the sand and she bought a residence there. It's been 6 years since that terrible night. She'd wept endless tears after the tragedy and in spite of the situation Tsunade remained with her, consoling her when no one else would. It was during that time that she learned how the village had snubbed her and her son, how the Leaf had taken her husband from her and spit on her and her son, his legacy. But I'll make them pay. I'll show them how big of a mistake they made that day. Naruto will become a powerful shinobi and Kami willing a Kazekage that will lead the Sand in a victorious war against the Leaf. I've dedicated myself to that goal. I will make Naruto strong. I'll make him worthy of the name Namikaze. Of course, swearing to make Naruto into a powerful shinobi isn't the same as turning Naruto into a living weapon. As much as Kushina wants to prove to the Leaf the mistake they made, she doesn't want to do that by turning her son into a murdering machine. So, at least once a week Naruto and I go to a public park. Both Naruto and I come here so Naruto can spend time with other kids. It's still 2 years before Naruto can join the Shinobi Academy, so I want him to socialize with other kids. It's been 5.5 years since Naruto and I came to this village and the people of the village are just now starting to accept us. The park Naruto and Kushina come to visit was built less than 10 years ago and there are a variety of things children can play on and with. Seesaws, jungle gyms, swings, slides, and even a carousel. She's dressed in common clothing for residents of the Sand. Since the village is in the middle of the desert, there is very little in the way of fashion for villagers to buy that's practical for the environment, so she wears the standard clothing most villagers wear. The clothing is comfortable even in the high heat and breathes well. Naruto wears a similar outfit, though his is naturally made for young boys. Her long red hair hangs down past shoulder blades hanging at her knees. She is not the only parent watching their child play at the park. A group of parents, mostly mothers, have grouped together and talk amongst themselves. Some of them sit on benches, while others stand. Kushina stands near them, but not a part of their group, she never has been. From the day she settled here the people of this village have looked at her as nothing but a foreigner. However, that stigma doesn't really apply to Naruto, and the parents didn't tell their children to avoid him because he wasn't born here. Naruto has been here since before he was 6 months old, and both Kushina and he are legal citizens of the village. Thinking about that, Kushina remembers that night, that terrible night 6 years ago. Scene transition. Flashback. Sitting in a hospital room, the antiseptic smell permeating her nostrils, Kushina is worried. She awoke after the Kyuubi has already been stopped and she hasn't seen anyone since she woke up. You can't be serious. Tsunade roars from the hall. She looks toward the door, watching it open and in walks not only Tsunade but the 3rd Hokage Sarutobi as well. The 3rd is dressed in his Hokage robes, while Tsunade wears her normal clothing. Tsunade Sarutobi, she mutters in greeting, her fatigue showing in her voice. Where is Naruto, Minato? Both of them have somber expressions on their faces and she can tell that the news isn't good. Something happened. One or both of them is dead. Kushina Tsunade begins, casting a glare at Sarutobi, who remains silent. Minato is gone. He died stopping the Kyuubi. While the news is sad, it isn't shocking. The last time she saw Minato he said he might be able to stop the demon, but he'll die in the process. Knowing him and how precious the leaf was to him, she knew that there was no way she could talk him out of going. He was the Hokage, protector of the village and all of its people. He had to go. What about Naruto? She asks with the panic rising in my voice. The thought of Naruto dying while Kushina survives making her want to vomit. Don't worry Kushina-san, he's fine. He's in another room under Anbu guard. Sarutobi finally speaks up. Anbu guard? Why is he under Anbu guard? Kushina asks, the panic returning to her voice. The two of them look at one another. Kushina-san, Minato couldn't kill the Kyuubi. Sarutobi explains. He had to seal it away in a newborn baby. You mean Naruto? She asks in realization and Sarutobi nods. Unfortunately yes, Minato felt that it should be his child to contain the demon and he wanted Naruto to be treated like a hero for containing the demon every day of his life. Sarutobi explains with a solemn tone. But that isn't going to happen, is it? Kushina knowingly asks and Sarutobi sighs, looking away in shame as Tsunade glares angrily at him. I tried to convince the council of Naruto's connection to Minato, but they've declared that both you and Naruto aren't his family. Naruto's family name will be Uzumaki. What? Kushina demands in surprise, sitting up in the hospital bed with sudden violence. Minato and I were married. Naruto is his son and deserves to be an amicus. I know the Kushina-san, but the council sees things differently. Sarutobi explains for her. They feel that you were Minato's mistress and Naruto is nothing but his bastard son. But that isn't true. We had a marriage certificate and we were legally married. Kushina insists, but Sarutobi shakes his head, removing his cage hat. Would you happen to have a copy of that certificate? He asks, and Kushina nods. There was one in our house, it's there. As soon as I can walk I'll go get it myself. Sarutobi takes the new information in, shaking his head slowly before he puts his hat back on. Unfortunately your home has been leveled, one of the Kyuubi's tails crushed your home and burned everything. There's nothing there. What? She asks with wide eyes and disbelief in her voice. I'm sorry Kushina-san, I really am. Sarutobi apologizes. I'll leave you alone to grieve, the funeral will be held tomorrow, please try to attend. Sarutobi leaves then, closing the door behind him, Tsunade silently remains. Looking at the blonde San and Kushina can feel the tears in her eyes, tears for the loss of her husband and the betrayal of his family by the people he died to protect. They betrayed him, he sacrificed himself for them, and how do they remember him? They deny his son his rightful place and call him a bastard and me a mistress. Kushina begins to cry, pressing her hands to her face she feels Tsunade embrace her, holding Kushina in her arms in a warm embrace. It's okay Tsunade says soothingly, stroking her hair. Let it out Kushina, let it all out. She cries for hours and the next day she doesn't attend the funeral. Instead she spends the next day collecting on the insurance policies on Minato's life and preparing to leave the village. Naturally Sarutobi doesn't want to let her leave, but there's nothing he can do to keep her in the leaf. Neither Naruto nor she are shinobi of the leaf, and since her marriage to Minato isn't being recognized, she has no link to village, and neither does Naruto. Scene transition. Present time. The next thing she knows the wind gently blows across the sand and she's back in the park, the dry air of the sand reminding her of where she is. Looking toward Naruto she quickly spots his blonde head amongst the other kids, he and the other children playing on the carousel. He's smiling, enjoying himself as he plays with the other children. It's then that she notices a man and a girl approach the park. The man is around her age, his short dirty blonde hair ear-length around his head and he's dressed in normal civilian clothing. He has bandages wrapped around his forehead under his hair and she can tell that something isn't quite right about him. The little girl he's leading is a little red-haired girl. She's dressed in children's clothing and her red hair is tied into two pigtails. She clutches a teddy bear to her chest, her green eyes rimmed with dark circles like she hasn't been sleeping. What's really odd about her is that a small amount of sand seems to follow her, shifting around her feet as she walks. Is the sand following her? Could she have some sort of Kekkei Genkai that lets her control the sand? She puts her thoughts on hold as the man walks toward the groups of parents while the little girl walks toward the swings. Seeing the little red head coming the children playing on the swings quickly vacate them leaving the little girl alone as she sits down on one of the swings. Clutching the bear to her chest and looking down at the ground, the girl's loneliness is written all over her. Those kids, they ran from her like she's got a disease. What could be so bad about that innocent little girl that people would want to avoid her like that? In a search for answers Kushina looks to the man who brought her and she can see that the other parents in the park are keeping their distance from him. They whisper amongst themselves, looking at the young man with expressions of disdain and distrust. Do the people in this village really despise people with bloodline limits that much? I'd heard that the hidden mist was like that, which is why I chose the sand as a residence. With the Uzumaki Kekkei Genkai, will the people of this village treat Naruto and I like that when they learn about it. Looking back at the kids, Kushina watches as Naruto jumps off the carousel. He talks to some of the other children, his eyes darting to the red head, and he blinks in surprise when he hears whatever the other children have to say about her. Naruto waves his hand dismissively, smiling he walks from the carousel over to the swings. Glancing around Kushina can't see all the other parents watching him with horror in their eyes as Naruto approaches the red-haired girl. Channeling just a little chakra into her ears, her hearing becomes sharper and she's capable of hearing Naruto and the red-haired girl's conversation. "Hi. I'm Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto says cheerfully in greeting. "What's your name?" The little girl looks at him longingly a moment and then looks away, her arms holding the bear tighter against her chest. "My name's Gaara," she answers, her voice squeaking as she speaks. "Gaara. Want me to give you a push?" Naruto asks her. The girl looks at him, blinking in astonishment. "Do you want to play with me?" The girl asks in surprise. "Yeah, why not?" Naruto asks her, and she stares at him like he's just said he's a living god. "I dunno, none of the other children ever wanna play with me." She answers him. "Well, I'll play with you, Gaara-chan," Naruto says with a smile. He moves behind her, gently pushing the little red-haired girl as she uses one hand to hold onto the swing, the other clutching the bear to her chest. At first she's quiet, but as Naruto gently pushes her, taking her higher and higher, she begins to laugh as she swings on the swing, and Naruto smiles as the girl enjoys being pushed. Naruto. What's odd about the scene is the sand beneath her moves back and forth, staying under her as she swings on the swing. A woman clears her throat from behind Kushina and she turns around to see a woman dressed similar to herself with short dark hair and dark eyes. "The blonde is your boy, isn't he?" she asks bluntly. "His name is Naruto," Kushina coolly informs the woman. "And he is my son." "What of it?" she finishes, crossing her arms over her chest. "You shouldn't let him associate with that thing," the woman hisses, obviously referring to red-haired child on the swing. "That thing?" Kushina asks, and the woman scoffs. "Yes, that thing your son is playing with. You should tell him to stay away from it," she continues. "Why should I tell him to stay away? That thing has the one-tailed Shukaku sealed inside it," she growls in anger. "It's a monster." Hearing that, Kushina is reminded of how the leaf treated Naruto, and she can still hear the villagers whispering in hushed voices as she carried him out of the village. "Did she ask to be a demon container?" Kushina asks in a low voice, gritting her teeth to keep her anger in check. "I can't get angry. If I do, they'll wonder why I'm taking their treatment of the girl so harshly, and they'll begin to wonder about Naruto." The woman blinks in surprise. What?" she stutters, clearly surprised by the question. "I asked you if she asked to have the demon sealed in her." She repeats herself in a calm, logical tone. The woman looks at Kushina with surprise in her eyes. "What does that matter?" "Everything," Kushina answers. "Just because she has a demon sealed inside of her doesn't make her a monster. She attacks people." Looking at the girl laughing and enjoying herself on the swing, Kushina can't imagine her attacking someone in cold blood. Naruto jumps on the swing next to her, building up momentum and swinging in the opposite direction of Gaara, smiling at the red-haired girl as the two of them play together. "She isn't attacking Naruto," Kushina says with a shrug of her shoulders. "It doesn't look like she means to hurt anyone to me. She has the demon sealed inside her. If you don't warn your boy to stay away from her, you'll regret it when you bury him." Kushina shakes my head slowly in pity. "I'll deal with that when the time comes," she tells the woman, turning her head away from her. "Whatever," the woman says dismissively. "It's your child's funeral." But that the woman walks away, returning to the other parents as Naruto and the girl called Gaara continue to swing on the swings. Watching the two of them, Kushina can't help but wonder whether or not Naruto has made a friend in the little redhead. Do the people of this village honestly think that being a Jinchuriki makes a person a monster? No, that isn't true. Naruto isn't a monster, and neither is this Gaara girl. I don't care what she's done, no child is born a monster. Monsters are made, not born. Scene transition. Flashback. It had been 3 days since the Kyuubi's attack on the village hidden in the leaves. It's the day after the mass funeral held for everyone who died during the catastrophe. Now Kushina stands at the village gate, Naruto held in her arms wrapped in a warm blanket. He quietly sleeps, and she wears a backpack on her back with all her worldly possessions from the leaf in it. With Minato gone and her marriage to him null and void, she has no reason to remain in the Leaf Village and fully intends to return to her home, the Whirlpool Village. Sarutobi accompanied her to the village gate in a vain attempt to convince her to remain in the Leaf. "Kushina-san, I really do wish you'd reconsider this," Sarutobi pleads for the 3rd time. "Naruto is Minato's son. Then allow us to call ourselves Namikaze. Let me declare that I'm his legal wife and Naruto is his legitimate heir." Sarutobi sighs in frustration, shaking his head. "Kushina-san, you know I can't do that," he reminds her longingly. The council unanimously agreed that Naruto can't have any connection to Minato. They fear that the public won't accept any connection between the hero who saved them and the child that now represents the demon to them. Some are even calling for Naruto's death. "It's everything I can do keep him alive. Without physical proof, no one will believe that he's truly Minato's child and heir. Naruto isn't the Kyuubi." Kushina spits at him in disgust. Minato wanted him to be treated as a hero, not as a scapegoat for the village's animosity. Sarutobi sighs again. I know that, and there are a handful of people in the world who support your claim that Naruto truly is Minato's heir and you are his legal wife. However, the council will not be swayed by a handful of people, no matter who they are. Without physical evidence they'll never accept Naruto as Minato's heir and you as his wife. Then there's nothing keeping me in this accursed place. Kushina says matter-of-factly. I refuse to raise my son in the village that killed his father and betrayed his legacy. Kushina-san, you know that this isn't what I want. It isn't what Minato wanted. You presume to tell me what my dead husband wants for my child. Minato wanted Naruto to be treated like a hero, instead you're treating him as a pariah. Kushina growls in anger. What I want and what Minato wanted is for Naruto to be recognized as what he is, the legitimate son of the fourth Hokage. I'm sorry Kushina-san, but that will never happen. Then there's nothing for us to discuss. I'm leaving the Leaf, and I'm taking my son with me. Gushi-chan. A familiar woman's voice calls out. Tsunade. Looking toward the source of the noise, Kushina sees not only the Sannin, but also her assistant Shizune walking down the road toward her. Tsunade has a suitcase on wheels behind her, while Shizune has a small bag on her left shoulder. Neither are wearing their headbands. Tsunade, Shizune Sarutobi says in greeting, curious as to what the two medical ninja are doing here. Sensei Tsunade says coldly in greeting, and Shizune bows to Sarutobi. Okizama Shizune whispers in greeting. Tsunade, Shizune-san, what are you both doing here? Kushina asks, giving voice to the thought. Tsunade grins. Shizune and I are coming with you Kushi-chan. Tsunade says with a smile. Tsunade. Sarutobi blurts in surprise. You can't just leave. The people of the village need your talents now more than ever. The people of the village have never done me any favors. Tsunade bleakly responds. Now one of my friends needs my help. I'm not going to turn my back on her for the sake of a village that does nothing but chew good people up and spit out their corpses. Sarutobi opens his mouth to say something and then closes it again, probably remembering Tsunade's troubled past and the many precious lives the Leaf has taken from her. Besides, Tsunade continues. I'm only going to travel around with Kushi-chan until she gets settled in, then I'll return to the village. I'll be gone a month at the most. Sarutobi sighs in resignation. I suppose he assents. But you're important Tsunade, a Sannin. Please don't be gone long. I won't. Tsunade says with a sly smile. Scene transition. A week later, Tsunade, Shizune and Kushina along with Naruto in her arms arrive at the Whirlpool village, or rather, what's left of it. Okami Kushina whispers, looking at the carnage from the village gate with shocked wide eyes. The walls that once surrounded the village are gone. The buildings and homes and people that once lived within those walls are gone, only a handful of people are up and moving, the smell of death hanging in the air. Looking around, it's like she's been physically struck, seeing all the death and destruction, she can't believe her eyes. Without thinking Kushina runs for the Uzumaki compound. Walking to where the Uzumaki lived, she knows in her heart that nothing's left even before she gets there. Walking to the spot where the Uzumaki compound once was, it's only rubble, human bodies lying amidst the wreckage, the faces of her extended family mutilated and forever frozen in horror and disbelief. No, she whispers in disbelief. She turns away, unable to look at the scene anymore without gagging. Kushina Tsunade whispers, for once not using the nickname she and Jiraiya gave to the red-haired tomboy. Tsunade Kushina whimpers, suddenly very glad for the Sannin's presence. She can't hold back the tears. Whimpering and sobbing in grief over the loss of her entire clan, Tsunade puts a hand on her shoulder and gently steers her away from the scene. Let's go, there's nothing we can do here. Tsunade gently whispers. Scene transition. After Kushina wept for her fallen family, she had a decision to make. With the whirlpool gone, she no longer has a home to go home to and needed to choose a new place to live, a place to call home. Unfortunately there were very few options. She would sooner die than go back to the Leaf after the way they treated Minato's last will, and during the last war, Minato became very well known as the Yellow Flash, particularly in the Cloud and Rock. Naruto and she would be ill-welcomed there as she's sure the Cloud learned that Kushina was involved with Minato and put a hit out on her just for that. That leaves the Sand and Mist. Recently the Mist had undergone a drastic shift as shinobi with Kekkei Genkai were persecuted and killed simply for having a bloodline limit. Since Kushina is a carrier of the Uzumaki bloodline and Naruto likely is as well, the two of them would never be welcome there. Even if they were to sneak in, if Naruto accidentally discovered his Kekkei Genkai, both he and Kushina would be hunted and killed just for being what they are. Since the reason she left Konoha is because of the way they spit on her late husband's wishes and because the people of the village viewed Naruto as the Kyuubi and not as a person, if they were to go to the Mist, they'd be in the exact same situation, only for a different reason. So, that leaves the Sand. I'm heading to the village hidden in the sand. She finally informs both Shizune and Tsunade. Shizune blinks in surprise, while Tsunade merely nods her understanding. I see. We'll need new clothes if we're going to the desert. Tsunade comments and Kushina nods. I'll pay for your clothes if need be. Kushina offers, and Tsunade shakes her head. If we're going to the sand we need to get going. It's going to be a long and hard journey. Agreed. Scene transition. Present time. Kushina blinks the memory away, refocusing on the present as both Naruto and Gaara stop swinging. She watches as Naruto heads toward the square-shaped jungle gym and Gaara follows, apparently unwilling to be separated from her new playmate. Seeing Naruto begin to climb on the jungle gym while Gaara looks on, obviously concerned, Kushina chooses then to meander over to the young man who brought Gaara to the park. Stopping next to him, her gaze travels to her son as he continues to climb the jungle gym, while Gaara is apparently unwilling to let go of the bear to climb on the jungle gym. "Is that your daughter?" Kushina asks casually, nodding toward Gaara. Out of the corner of her eye she can see the man scowl. "No, she isn't my daughter. She's my niece," he says with disgust in his voice. Even he doesn't like her. "She's only your niece?" she asks curiously, keeping her own emotions in check. "What about her mother or her father?" "Her father is the Kazekage, her mother is dead." "I'm sorry," she offers in heartfelt sympathy. "My husband died around the time my son was born, so I know what it's like to raise a child alone." The man's face doesn't move, but she can see his eyes change, a sudden vehemence filling them as he stares directly at the little redhead. "She's a Jinchuriki, right?" He glances at her, no surprise or even a hint of emotion at her question, only that hatred simmering in his eyes. "The other villagers told you, right?" he asks, and she nods. "Her mother died during the sealing, right?" "That's very astute of you," he says with a slight nod. He doesn't say anything else, and it doesn't take a lot for her to put the pieces together. The girl's father is alive, and her mother is dead. He's her uncle, and he looks at the girl like she's a monster. Could it be that his sister was her mother, and he blames the girl for the death of his sister? "She was your sister, wasn't she?" she asks with a low voice. Surprise flickers in on his face, there and gone in the blink of an eye. "Yes," he answers, his own voice lowering to a whisper. Looking toward Naruto and Gaara once more, Kushina can't help but get the impression that the man blames the girl for his sister's death. "My son is a Jinchuriki too," she whispers to him, and he blinks in surprise. "My husband died sealing the Biju into him," she explains, not mentioning exactly which Biju was sealed into Naruto. "But I never blamed him for my husband's death." The man looks at Kushina with questioning in his eyes. "How can you not? Your husband died so the demon could be sealed into your child," he says with venom in his voice. "But Naruto never asked to be a Jinchuriki," she says with a faint smile. "My husband chose to seal the Biju into Naruto and no one else, it wasn't Naruto's choice. I could never hold my son responsible for my husband's death. He's all that remains of my precious husband that I loved so much. I thought like you once," he explains to her. "I thought that Gaara was all that's left of my sister, but I just can't forgive her for taking my sister from me." Kushina shakes her head slowly. "But Gaara never asked to be a Jinchuriki, just like Naruto never asked to be a Jinchuriki. The person you should blame is the one responsible for the sealing, not the Jinchuriki." "The Kazekage ordered the sealing," he trails, and she blinks in surprise. "The Kazekage ordered a Biju sealed into his own daughter? What in the world would possess him to order something like that?" As if the man can read her thoughts, he continues. "He wanted to make a powerful weapon loyal to the village," the man continues. "But Gaara began to hurt people, and everyone believes that it's her true nature, even though she insists that she never meant to harm anyone." "And you believe that a 6-year-old girl would attack someone in cold blood?" Kushina asks in disbelief. "She's a monster." "That's what monsters do," he says with conviction. Her teeth grind in her mouth at the statement, but she forces herself not to show any emotion. "Monsters are not born, they're made." Kushina retorts absolutely. "What would you know?" he asks, glaring at Kushina with anger in his eyes. She doesn't look away, instead looking into his eyes with a cold glare. "The real monster isn't Gaara, the monster is the one responsible for sealing the demon in her and killing your sister. Only a heartless monster would sacrifice his child's mother to turn her into a weapon." He looks away, and she can see him struggling to accept the argument she's presented to him. A part of him wants to accept the argument and the reasoning behind it, while another part of him absolutely despises the girl for simply being what she is. Seeing as he isn't going to talk anymore, Kushina walks a few steps away and continues to watch Gaara and Naruto play with one another. Sparing one last look at the man, she can see the gears of his mind turning, processing and arguing with himself. She glances back toward the kids, and she can see that they've moved to a second dome-shaped jungle gym. Again Naruto has climbed onto the jungle gym while Gaara remains on the ground, watching Naruto climb on the metal dome. "See Gaara-chan, it's fine," Naruto assures her, standing on the top of the metal dome like a conquering hero. Then a gust of wind blows, and every muscle in Kushina's body tenses as Naruto sways, his feet slipping off of metal and plummeting through the hole. "No." She bends her knees, coiling her legs and springing into a run, pushing her body to move when suddenly the sand beneath Naruto jumps up to meet him, catching him and slowly bringing him down to the ground unharmed and without a scratch. Kushina comes to a stop by the outside of the dome, looking at Naruto lying on the sand and then toward Gaara, who has her head directed straight toward the ground, clutching the bear even tighter in shame. What happened? Naruto asks curiously, looking down at the sand and then rubbing it with his hand, as if to test it. Kushina looks at him and then toward Gaara, smiling as she steps away from the dome and toward the little redhead. You did that, didn't you? She asks in a calm, level voice. Gaara quickly nods in shame, as if expecting Kushina to launch into a storm of accusation and start yelling at her. Kneeling down, Kushina gently reaches out toward the little girl. Touching the girl on the chin, she gently pulls her chin up so that Gaara is looking Kushina in the eye. Thank you, you saved my son from getting any injuries. Kushina thanks the girl earnestly as she takes her hands away from her. Gaara looks at the older woman like she doesn't believe her ears, and Naruto steps through the dome, the rest of the parents looking on in amazement at Kushina's interaction with the supposed demon. Did you move the sand for me, Gaara-chan? Naruto asks with a smile, and again Gaara quickly nods in shame. Naruto is silent for a second, and Kushina looks at him to see his eyes wide in wonder. That's so cool. Can you teach me to do that? Naruto asks the girl, pointing at his chin with his right pointer finger, leaning forward in anticipation. Gaara blinks in surprise, turning away. I can't teach you. Gaara says with disappointment flashing in Naruto's eyes, and she quickly looks back at him with sudden resolution in her gaze. But it isn't because I don't want to. I can't teach you because I'm the only one who can, not even my father the Kazekage can do it. I thought so. Her power comes from the Shukaku. Naruto hasn't yet developed any extraordinary abilities related to the Kyuubi though. That sucks. Naruto says in disappointment, kicking the sand at his feet. Though, I am glad that you saved me. Kushina glares accusingly at her son. Naruto, you shouldn't have been climbing on the dome like that. She scolds him, and Naruto quickly ducks his head in shame. Do you know how I would have felt if you'd busted your head open or broken your legs? Sorry. Naruto apologizes in a beaten tone, and Kushina sighs reluctantly, shaking her head. You're lucky Gaara was around. She admonishes him. If not for her quick thinking, you could have been seriously hurt. I know, I said I'm sorry. Naruto apologizes again. The boy is genuinely sorry, and Gaara looks confused as she stands there. Kushina quickly gets the feeling that this is the first time an adult around her has been yelling, and it wasn't directed at her. Poor girl. Well, Kushina begins, turning toward the small redhead. How would you like to have dinner with Naruto and me? Gaara blinks in surprise at the question. You want me to have dinner with you? She asks in a surprised voice, and Kushina nods. You saved my son's life. I want to show you my gratitude. Kushina says casually. That and I haven't noticed how the people were treating you before now. If I'd have known earlier, I'd have done something sooner. Can you wait here a moment? I have to ask my uncle if I can. Gaara trails, and Kushina smiles at the girl, nodding agreeably. The little girl turns toward the man who brought her to the park and runs toward him, the sand following her obediently like a lost dog. Mom, is something wrong with her? Naruto asks quietly. The way she acts and the rings around her eyes. Kushina nods solemnly, the smile fading from her features as she observes Gaara approach her uncle. That girl has been treated like a monster her whole life, Naruto. She tells him in a hushed voice. Why would they treat her like a monster? She doesn't look like a monster. Kushina shrugs her shoulders. Not everyone thinks like I do, Naruto. But I hope that you remember what I've taught you. That people are what's on the inside, not the outside. Kushina looks down to her son, smiling her approval at his remembering her lesson so well. But boy, both Naruto and Kushina watch as Gaara returns to them with her uncle behind her, looking solemn. Uncle Yashimaru says he can't attend, but I can. May I still come? Sure. Kushina answers casually. Greetings. Yashimaru says with a tilt of his head. I am rather busy tonight, so I would ask that you escort Gaara-chan home after dinner. No problem. Kushina says with a smile, and Yashimaru nods toward her. I should go now, Gaara-chan. Yashimaru says, kneeling down and looking at the redhead. Be sure to listen to Uzumaki-san, okay? Gaara nods empathically. I will, Uncle Yashimaru. But that Yashimaru smiles at her, turning and walking away. He leaves the park, leaving Naruto, Gaara and Kushina alone. Can we stay and play some more, Uzumaki-san? Gaara asks, and Kushina smiles at her. Sure, we can stay for a while. So play to your heart's content. Chapter 2. Hours later, Naruto and Gaara are both playing with one another in the park. Naruto and Kushina came here after lunch, and now it's getting late, around dinner time. Most of the other kids and their parents have left, many of which gave Kushina evil stares at her son, playing with the Jinchuriki their village despises. The two of them, however, have been wholeheartedly enjoying themselves. Gaara especially seems extremely happy that she's found someone her age to play with. Kushina can only wonder how the girl will turn out now that she has someone in her life she can call a friend. If what Yashimaru said was true and she was born to become a weapon, what kind of person is the Kazukiage that he would intentionally seal a demon into his child to turn her into a weapon? He killed her mother to turn his daughter into a weapon, and now the child is the village pariah. Okay, both of you. Kushina calls out to both of them, the two of them playing on a seesaw. It's time we went home for dinner. Naruto pushes up, allowing Gaara to get off the seesaw before Naruto slips off, careful to brace himself as he drops down. Once both of them get off the seesaw, Gaara follows Naruto as he walks over to his mother, a downtrodden expression at having his playtime cut short. Don't look like that, Naruto. Kushina half-heartedly scolds him. It's getting late and we have a dinner guest tonight. Gaara's eyes go wide and she opens her mouth to say something when Naruto beats her to it. I know, Mom. He says with a smile, completely missing Gaara's expression behind him. I was just having a lot of fun. Kushina looks to the little girl a moment, the look on her face telling her that she was expecting Naruto to blame her for Kushina ending their playtime. Kushina inwardly shakes her head at that, both disgusted at the way the sand treats their Jinchuriki and saddened by the personality that is developed in the young Gaara. The people who made you like this are the monsters. Only a fool would blame a child for a decision that was made by their parents. Come on, Kushina says gently to both children. Let's go. Naruto takes her left hand and she holds out her right for Gaara, whose eyes flicker from Kushina's hand to her face in surprise. You want me to hold your hand? Gaara asks in surprise, stepping back timidly, while Kushina smiles reassuringly at the girl. Of course. She says matter-of-factly. Shouldn't children hold hands with adults when they're traveling? The little girl looks away and Naruto glances around his mother's legs, looking at Gaara with curiosity in his eyes. Uncle Yashimaru never let me hold his hand before, she trails, and Kushina smiles at the girl, extending her hand closer to Gaara. Well, I let you hold mine, okay? Kushina gently responds and the girl nods, slowly reaching out and grasping her hand. As their skin meets for the first time, Kushina gets the odd impression that the girl's hand is covered in sand, her touch grainy and dry. Kushina forces herself not to check Gaara's hand to see whether or not the little girl practices good hygiene or if it's something else altogether. Let's go. Kushina says with a smile, leading both Jinchuriki of the sand back to her home. Home isn't much, not for the last members of the once great Uzumaki clan of the Whirlpool. Using some of Minato's life insurance, Kushina was able to buy citizenship in the village for both Naruto and her and a moderate single-family home in the village. It's one of many single-family homes, a two-story structure with an unfinished basement. The neighborhood is friendly enough and crime for the most part isn't an issue in a village that exists to create shinobi. For money, Kushina started her own business, using knowledge she gleaned as a shinobi to start a weapon shop that she runs out of a shed built behind of her house. Business was slow at first, but once the shinobi of the village started talking about the quality and price of her wares, many of them started to buy from her. This of course drew the attention of the Kazukiage, and after a very short and very tersely worded message, she was forced to increase her prices, so she didn't put all the local weapon shops out of business. That's all thanks to my Kekkei Genkai. If not for it, I'd have to join the sand as a shinobi or find some other job. Now though, I've got a healthy business that's keeping Naruto and I fed and the lights on. Walking into the front door, you're in a central hallway on the right side of the house. The stairs are on the left up to the second floor and the living, dining and kitchen areas are all on the first floor. In the backyard there's a small shed where Kushina forges the weapons she sells. Upstairs only 2 of the 4 bedrooms are being used and the other 2 are empty. Neither Naruto nor she had much luggage when they left the Leaf those many years ago. Leading both Naruto and Gaara into the home, Kushina closes the door behind them while both Naruto and Gaara slip off their shoes. Thank you for having me in your home, Gaara trails and Naruto grins. Come on, Gaara-chan, I'll show you my room. He says, starting up the steps, stopping halfway as Gaara stands in the entryway. She looks to Kushina for permission and Kushina nods toward the girl, smiling to show her approval. I'll call when dinner's ready. Have fun, you two. Kushina says with a dismissive wave. Naruto grins and Gaara takes the words as Kushina's approval. Gaara quickly starts up the steps after Naruto, who resumes his ascent with Gaara in tow. Watching the two of them go up the steps, Kushina is glad to see that the sand that follows Gaara doesn't leave a trail. Not a speck of it is left after she leaves the area. That's good. I wasn't looking forward to having to clean up little bits of sand all over my floor. Of course, trying to keep the house completely free of any sand would be a foolish and ultimately futile errand. The village is in the middle of a vast desert, there's nothing but sand and wind and mountains for miles. So, she's content to keep the floors relatively clean, and taking off their shoes at the entrance does a lot to keep errant sand from getting all over the floor. Taking off her own sandals and setting them down near the door, Kushina walks into the house, heading for the kitchen. An hour later the 3 of them are in the dining room. They've already eaten, and conversation has been light, Naruto bragging about how many push-ups he can do and how far he can run without getting exhausted. For the most part Gaara simply sits there quietly, listening as she eats. Her table manners are impeccable, and Kushina gets the feeling that her uncle harped on table manners or any other excuse to scold her. What a life she must have had until now. I was so busy with raising Naruto and getting us established in a new place, I never even bothered to think about any Jinchuriki born in this village. But I'll do what I can to make up for that. I'll show her that not everyone in the village hates her and that she has some people who will be kind to her. What the girl really needs is a loving family, not an uncle who merely looks after her. So, Gaara-chan Kushina begins with a meal over and everyone finished. How was my cooking? I know it must not compare to the Kazukiya's personal chefs. Her eyes go wide in surprise. No. Not at all. It was very good. Gaara adamantly praises her. Normally Uncle Yashimaru makes my food. Your dad must be really busy, huh, Gaara-chan? Naruto casually asks. What about your mom? Is she a shinobi too? Kushina opens her mouth to say something, to reprimand Naruto for asking for personal information that's none of their business, but Gaara's solemn expression and the words that come out of her mouth cause the words to die in her throat. My mother is Didi killed her, Gaara admits in a tiny voice. Naruto blinks in surprise. Did you? He asks scandalously, and Gaara shakes her head no. No. I'd never harm my mother. I never even met her. My uncle used to say she died when I was born, though the people of the village say I killed her. Naruto just looks at her in surprise, and Kushina stands up, grabbing her plate and scooping up Naruto's before she walks around to the seat next to him, grabbing Gaara's plate from in front of her. You didn't kill your mother. Kushina says as she walks to the kitchen, depositing the dishes in the sink. Your mother died so you could be born. She continues, choosing her words carefully. You didn't ask to be born, so you aren't responsible for what happened. Gaara blinks in surprise, and Kushina can't tell that she's never heard someone not blame her for the death of her mother or rationalize it the way the Uzumaki woman just did. What kind of moron would blame a little girl for something completely out of her control? I don't think you killed your mom. Naruto says, and Gaara looks at Naruto in surprise, Kushina keeping an eye on the two of them from the kitchen. What about you, Naruto-kun? Where's your father? Gaara asks in that same tiny voice, and Naruto blinks in surprise, a happy smile coming to his face. My dad died around the time I was born. He died fighting against a monster that attacked our village and saved Mom and me. Mom says he was a hero, and I'm gonna grow up to be a powerful shinobi who can protect the people precious to him just like him. Gaara looks at him curiously, her head tilting slightly to the side. But, wouldn't you have to die to be like him? She asks in that same tiny voice. Oh you will, I'm gonna be strong like him, even stronger so nothing can kill me, and I'll be able to protect my precious people forever. In the kitchen Kushina smiles at the youthful proclamation. He's like his father in so many ways. Are you going to become a shinobi then, Naruto-kun? Gaara asks, and Naruto nods. Yeah. Mom's already been teaching me some things, and she says she's gonna teach me a really killer jutsu before I enter the academy. That's only if I think you're ready to learn it before you enter the academy. Kushina calls out from the kitchen. Boom. The sound of an explosion rips through the home, ringing in Kushina's ears. The Uzumaki woman blinks in surprise, the sound like many exploding tags going off at once. Like someone setting off a bomb. The both of you stay inside. She orders both of the children, a harsh tone to her otherwise loving and kind voice. Neither Gaara nor Naruto move as Kushina runs toward the door, slipping her feet into her shoes before stepping out into the now night air. Her head spins around, searching the night sky for a sign, and quickly spotting a column of smoke rising up in the distance. That direction, the village government building. She quickly ducks back into the house, not taking more than a step inside and looking into the dining room. Naruto, you and Gaara are to stay inside no matter what. Lock the door and don't let anyone other than me into the house, understand? Kushina asks, speaking to her son. Naruto looks surprised at his mother's question. Yeah mom, what happened? I don't know, I'm going to go take a look, the both of you stay here. Kushina says again, ducking out and closing the door behind her. Taking to the rooftops, Kushina looks more like a shinobi rather than a citizen of the village as she makes her way toward the village government building and the source of the column of smoke. Upon getting close to the building, an Anbu appears in front of her, a katana in hand and a raven mask on his face. Kushina stops in her tracks at the sight of the shinobi. The area beyond here is restricted. He says with ice in his voice. If you insist on proceeding, I am authorized to use lethal force. The Anbu warns. I understand. Kushina acknowledges the warning, walking to the nearest edge away from the Anbu, she jumps down to the streets below. Walking toward the smoke on street level, Kushina quickly finds that uniformed shinobi have been posted, blocking access to the village government building. A small crowd is gathered, people trying to see what's going on and not daring to try and get past the sentry. Barely 15 minutes have passed and they've already blocked off access to the village government building. Was someone expecting this, or maybe they're trained in this type of thing and these shinobi reacted without orders. Approaching the crowd, Kushina carefully slips into the crowd, finding a familiar face in one of the many mothers she's seen in park with their child. What happened? She asks one of the people in the crowd as she approaches. The bomb went off in the village government building. The citizen says. It was supposedly an assassination attempt against the Kazakage. For some reason the image of Gaara's uncle comes to Kushina's mind. Her uncle and the look of absolute hatred in his eyes. Pushing through the crowd, Kushina manages to get close enough to the uniformed shinobi acting as a sentry to speak directly with him. "Excuse me," she begins politely. "A member of the Kazakage's family is currently a house guest of mine. No one is allowed to enter or leave the village government building by order of Kazakage-sama, no exceptions." The sentry says in a no-nonsense tone. That answers that. "Looks like Gaara will be staying the night with us tonight." "Alright, I'll take responsibility for the girl until she can be returned." Kushina walks away at that and once she's through the steadily growing crowd she quickly walks back toward her house. On the way back she can't shake the suspicion that Yashimaru tried to assassinate his brother in an attempt to avenge the loss of his sister. Before she knows it she's back at her front door and she tries the handle, finding it sturdily locked. "Good boy," she knocks loudly, calling out as she does. "Naruto. It's me. I'm home." Kushina calls out to her son. Less than 5 seconds later the lock opens and the door flies open, both Naruto and Gaara standing in the doorway. Gaara stands behind Naruto, a concerned look on her face with her teddy bear in her arms. Naruto's face showing his relief. Stepping inside, Kushina closes the door behind her. Slipping off her shoes as Naruto speaks. "So, what happened, Mom?" Naruto asks impatiently. Kushina shrugs her shoulders. "Unfortunately they have the village administration building sealed, no one is being allowed within 2 blocks of the building." "Is Kazakage-sama alright?" Gaara asks. She doesn't even call him father. "I don't know, Gaara-chan." Kushina admits. "Though for now I'll take care of you and you can stay here tonight." I don't want to impose." Gaara responds and Kushina is quick to shake her head. "Don't worry, we've got plenty of space and spare bedrooms." "Oh okay," Gaara hesitantly agrees. The night Naruto and Kushina both change into their bed clothes and Kushina loans Gaara a night shirt that she can wear to bed and a bed she can sleep in. With that the 3 of them go to bed around 10 and Kushina just assumes that the 2 children will go to sleep. Creak, her eyes pop open and she sits up, her hand shooting for and grasping a kunai hidden beneath her pillow. Kushina is still in her bedroom, the lights are off and the shades are open, moonlight flowing into the room. Her bedroom is simple, a bed, a nightstand and a freestanding wooden closet. The door is open and Gaara stands in the doorway. Her red hair is down and she's wearing the night shirt given to her by Kushina, clutching her teddy bear to her chest like it's the most important thing in the world. Her ever-present sand still remains around her feet. Seeing the girl just standing there, Kushina feeds just a little chakra into her eyes, enhancing her night vision and letting her pick out details. Gaara's face is set in a surprised expression and Kushina's hand leaves the kunai, smiling at the red-haired girl. "Gaara-chan?" Kushina asks in a friendly, welcoming tone. "Is something the matter?" The little girl looks away, an air of shame forming around her. "I'm sorry, Kushina-san. I didn't mean to wake you up, I thought you might still be awake." "You can't sleep?" Kushina asks knowingly. Gaara shakes her head no slowly. "How could you expect her to sleep? An attempt was just made on her father's life and her uncle probably died as a result of it. She's probably worried sick." "Do you want to come in and talk about it?" Kushina asks, patting the edge of the bed next to her. Gaara looks about hesitantly and Kushina smiles at the girl, motioning for her to come in with a wave of her hand. "Come in, sit with me. I'll stay awake with you if you want." Gaara steps inside, sitting on the edge of the bed on Kushina's right, her sand thankfully remaining on the floor. "I can't sleep," Gaara says in a whisper, looking down at the blankets as she clutches at the bear. "Poor thing. She's probably worried sick about her uncle." "I'm sure your uncle Yashimaru and your father are both fine, Gaara-chan." Kushina assuages her, lying through her teeth. "That isn't why I can't sleep." Gaara mutters and Kushina blinks in surprise. "Aren't you worried about your uncle and your father?" "I am very worried about Kazakage-sama and Uncle Yashimaru, but it isn't my concern for them that keeps me awake." Looking at the girl and the dark circles under her eyes and the stoic way she talks about sleep tells Kushina that there is in fact something much more than just concern that keeps her awake. "Why can't you sleep, Gaara-chan?" she asks in a concerned voice. Gaara looks at Kushina with unhappiness in her eyes. "The people of the village told you, didn't they?" "I'm a monster," she admits, her eyes falling to the floor at the sand that remains there. "You're not a monster, Gaara," Kushina says in absolute seriousness and Gaara looks up at her, genuinely surprised by Kushina's proclamation. "But even my Kazakage said that I'm a monster." Gaara argues pitifully. "He's wrong." Kushina responds absolutely. The girl blinks again in surprise. In the leaf the Hokage is a leader and his word is law. In the sand however, the current Kazekage has elevated himself and his position above that of just a simple leader. The Kazekage would have his subjects believe him to be a living god. Kushina knows firsthand that he refuses to see people in person, conducting any and all business from behind a screen and wearing a veil to cover his face. For a member of the village to say the man is wrong is tantamount to an act of heresy. For Gaara, a member of Kazukige's family who is told on a constant basis the absolute truth of their father's godhood, it's unbelievable. You mean that? She asks, and Kushina nods. You're a Jinchuriki Gaara, not a monster. Kushina explains to her. Just because you have a demon sealed inside you does not make you a demon. You're a hero Gaara because you're containing a demon in your body, something no one else can do. The other people of the village all think that I'm a monster. Why are you so different? Kushina looks at the girl solemnly. When Naruto was born a demon was sealed inside him by his father. He died to protect me and Naruto. When did that happen? I've never heard of a demon attacking our village. Naruto and I aren't from here. Kushina explains gently. I left that village because they didn't oblige by my husband's last wish. What did he want? He wanted Naruto to be treated as a hero. Kushina says with wistfulness to her voice. But instead the people of the village wanted him executed as retribution against the demon sealed in him. I couldn't comprehend how they could think that about my son, so I took him from the village and ultimately came here. So, Naruto-chan and I are the same? Gaara asks, and Kushina nods her head. Yes, you both have demons sealed inside you, but unlike you Naruto can go to sleep without a problem. I don't know why you can't sleep and Naruto can. Does Naruto know about his demon? Kushina shakes her head no slowly. No, I haven't told him about it. Kushina explains to Gaara. And I don't want you to say anything to him about it. Why haven't you told him? The people of the village and my family never hesitate to remind me. She says with petulance in her voice. Oh you poor thing. I am going to tell him, but I'm going to wait until the right time. If I tell him before it's the right time then he might not understand what it means. Okay I won't tell him. Gaara finally agrees. After that Gaara left Kushina's room, asking if she could go downstairs. Kushina told her she could, but didn't want her to turn on the stove or do anything dangerous or go outside. Gaara agreed to that and she left Kushina's room without another word, teddy bear in hand. The next morning Kushina rises early, intending to go to the village administration building and demand to see the Kazekage when there's a knock at her door. Having already gotten up and dressed, both Naruto and Gaara are eating breakfast in the dining room, so Kushina answers the door. Opening the door to see a uniformed shinobi standing there with short dark hair and eyes. He has a nervous look on his face as Kushina opens the door and the second she sees him, she knows that he must be here to either take Gaara away or demand that she go meet with the Kazekage. Can I help you? Kushina asks coolly. The man blinks in surprise, his eyes darting left and right. I am here to pick up Gaara. Kushina looks him over with a frosty expression. Pick her up and take her where? She asks, not budging from the doorway. She is to be entrusted to the village for care. Why doesn't her father Kazekage-sama take care of her? She is his child after all. That is not my concern. My orders are to pick up Gaara and deliver her to her new home. Kushina narrows her gaze, glaring at the man with hostility in her eyes. She has a home. If her father won't take care of her I'll adopt her. The man blinks in surprise and it's clear that he never thought a member of the village would ever want to have Gaara around. Willie the man stutters. Wait here. She tells the man, slamming the door in his face. She turns around, walking into the dining room to see Naruto and Gaara still eating at the table. I want the two of you to stay here. I'm going out to go see the Kazekage. Gaara has guilt written all over her face and Kushina looks at the girl sternly. Until I get back don't answer the door for anyone, okay? Both Gaara and Naruto nod, the obvious question hanging in the air. Kushina turns and marches to the door, slipping on her shoes she opens the door and steps out, surprising the shinobi. Take me to see the Kazekage. I'll speak to him personally about this. He nods once, starting off toward the village administration building, Kushina in tow. He leads Kushina into the building and ultimately to the Kazekage's office. With Gaara's fate hanging in the balance, the Kazekage is apparently willing to push his other business aside temporarily. Stepping into the Kazekage office Kushina drops to one knee, bowing graciously to the village leader. His office is a medium-sized room with several candles and a chandelier casting flickering light into the room. The Kazekage and his two assistants sit behind a veiled wall, and the Kazekage's hat has an additional veil on it, further concealing his face. Kazekage-sama Kushina speaks in submission. Kushina Uzumaki he says her full name. You dare to defy my orders and hold my daughter against my will. You entrusted Gaara to Yashimaru. Since Yashimaru did not come to pick her up I assume he is no longer her guardian. Yashimaru is a traitor and a fool. The Kazekage says with venom in his voice. Yes, that proves that he was the one who tried to kill the Kazekage. I have to keep that conversation we had secret. If it ever got out that I put that idea into his head, my head would be on a platter. Then I wish to formally adopt Gaara into my care. And why, pray tell, would you want to do that? The Kazekage asked suspiciously. Gaara is a Jinchuriki and was born to become this village's ultimate weapon. I have my reasons. Gaara is important to this village. Do you honestly think I'm going to simply turn her over to a foreigner whose loyalty is questionable? I would never betray this village or you, Kazekage-sama. I merely wish to serve the village as best I can. The Kazekage is silent for a full second. Explain. The Kazekage demands. You created Gaara to be a shinobi. I believe that if she were to have a loving normal family, she would be motivated to be a shinobi and become stronger. Emotions are of no use to a shinobi. The Kazekage retorts dryly. I have to sell this. I can't let him twist that poor girl into a monster. I believe that if Gaara were raised like a normal child and could form the bonds of love and family, she'd appreciate those bonds and do everything in her power to protect them and the village. Kushina explains carefully. She seems to react very positively to the attention I've given her, and I'm sure she'd be willing to become a shinobi of her own free will if she believed she could protect me and my son. Perhaps the Kazekage says in partial agreement. I assure you, Kazekage-sama, Gaara will become an excellent shinobi and no longer be a danger to anyone in the village. Then I offer this arrangement. The Kazekage begins. Gaara will become your responsibility. Anything she wants or needs will be your responsibility, the village will pay for nothing. Should she attack another villager, you will have to pay restitution and Gaara will be removed from your care and placed into the village's care to be raised as a weapon loyal only to the sand. He explains to Kushina. You will accept this arrangement or hand over my daughter. You have no other choice. Should you decline my arrangement and refuse to turn over Gaara willingly, I will take her back by force and have you charged for kidnapping. I gratefully accept that generous offer, Kazekage-sama. Kushina agrees, bowing her head. Good. Our business is concluded. You will leave now. He says with a dismissive wave of his hand. Chapter 3. Walking back into the house, Kushina sighs as she slips off her shoes. I'm home. She calls out loud. A pair of footsteps come running down the stairs and Kushina looks up to see both Naruto and young Gaara run down the stairs, the two of them stopping at the bottom, with Naruto looking expectantly at his mother, while Gaara holds her teddy bear to her chest, her eyes downcast, depression hanging over her like a cloud. The two of them are still dressed in their pajamas. What happened, Mom? What did the Kazekage say? Naruto asks inquisitively. Kushina's gaze settles on Gaara, smiling warmly at the redhead. She kneels down, reaching out to touch the girl on her shoulders. Gaara's eyes coming up to meet Kushina's gaze a moment before looking away again, her lower lip quivering in fear that Kushina is going to tell her that she's being taken back to be housed by the village. Gaara-chan, what do you think about living with Naruto and me? Kushina asks openly, emerald eyes going wide and blinking in surprise. Live with you? She whispers, hugging her bear tighter to her chest and looking down at it before glancing to Naruto and then back to the head of the bear. Gaara-chan's going to live with us? Naruto asks with a grin, and Kushina looks at him a moment, shaking her head with the barest of movement before she looks back at Gaara. Gaara-chan, would you like to live with Naruto and me? I'll adopt you into our family and you can be my daughter just like Naruto is my son. Gaara looks up at the red-haired woman, her eyes glittering in surprise. You want me in your family? She asks scandalously, and Kushina smiles at the girl, nodding emphatically. You're a good girl, Gaara-chan, and if you want I would like to make you a part of this family. In reality, her caretaker has already been decided, and even if the red-haired Jinchuriki doesn't want to be in Uzumaki, she is still Kushina's responsibility. She mumbles, looking at Kushina and then Naruto, her gaze seeking permission, and Naruto grins when Gaara's eyes meet his, and he gives her a thumb up. I think it'd be cool if you came to live here, Gaara-chan. Naruto voices his opinion, and again it's as though Gaara can't believe her ears. Both Naruto and I want you to be a part of our family, Gaara-chan. Kushina says assuredly. Even if I really had a family, Befere don't know what to do. Naruto grins again, waving his hand dismissively. It's easy, Gaara-chan. Naruto says matter-of-factly. Gaara trails, looking away from Kushina insecurely. I'd like to stay here. Naruto grins, taking a step forward. He reaches out and touches Gaara on her head, ruffling her hair playfully, while her sand continues to writhe around her feet. Welcome home, Gaara-chan. Naruto says with a grin, and Gaara cringes away from Naruto's touch, her hair already ruffled in spite of her attempt to prevent it. Welcome home. Kushina says, smiling reassuringly toward the red-haired girl, and the green-eyed girl blinks in surprise, nodding once. Thank you, Gaara agrees in a whisper. Kushina stands up at that, removing her hands from Gaara's shoulders. She puts her hands behind her back, turning her attention toward her son. Naruto, Gaara, we have some shopping to do, so both of you go get dressed, and we leave when you're ready. What are we going to buy, Mom? Naruto asks curiously, both he and Gaara still standing near the stairs. Well, first we'll need to get Gara-chan some clothes and then we'll have to get some better bed clothes for her bed. Gara's emerald eyes go wide and she shakes her head, her long hair swinging around her face while she continues to clutch the bear to her chest. You don't have to buy things for me, the bed is fine the way it is. Nonsense. Kushina smiles down at the young girl. You're a member of this family and that means you're going to live like one. No person should only have one set of clothes and pajamas, especially a growing girl. You don't want to cause any trouble. It isn't any trouble. Kushina says dismissively. We'll be back after a few hours and once you're settled and I'll go to work. What are we to do while you're at work? Whatever you want Gara-chan. Kushina says with a smile. Naruto chooses to work out and train because he wants to be a ninja, though that's his choice, and if you choose to do something else, then I'm not going to force you to become a shinobi. Gara trails, clearly surprised by Kushina's proclamation. Come on Gara-chan, let's go get dressed. Naruto suggests, starting up the steps. Separately of course. Kushina says matter-of-factly. The two of them head up the steps and Kushina sighs, walking into the kitchen while Naruto and Gara are both upstairs, checking the cupboards for anything she might need while she'll be out shopping. May as well make the most of the trip. Walking into the shopping district with Gara and Naruto on either side of her holding her hands, Kushina quickly realizes that it isn't just the mothers of the village who scorn the young Gara, but practically every pair of eyes she sees stares at her scandalously, their whispers telling her more and more. What is she doing with that thing? One man whispers as the three of them walk by, and Gara's eyes drop, the redhead obviously hearing the hushed whisper. Kushina-san, I don't think I should be here. Gara whimpers next to Kushina, Gara's hand squeezing hers tightly. It's fine Gara-chan. Kushina assures her, Naruto's own hand loose in hers. But, they're talking about you. I don't care. Kushina says dismissively. But, just ignore them Gara-chan. Kushina says with a shake of her head. They're idiots and they don't deserve your attention. But Gara stammers and Kushina looks down at her newly adopted daughter, smiling at her. It's fine Gara-chan, just don't think about it. Instead think about what kind of clothes you want to buy when we get to the store. I'd like to buy these please. Carrying an armful of girls' clothing, Kushina sets the bundle on the counter, the woman glancing down at the clothes and then the young redhead walking next to her, a scowl coming to the older woman's face. The woman glances down at the clothes on the counter and then raises her gaze, staring at Kushina with a simmering anger in her eyes. 2,000 cause. The woman spits and Kushina's eyes go wide. You've got to be kidding. That's 10 times what these should sell for. The woman behind the counter is unfazed by Kushina's remark. Sudden demand increased price. The woman snaps and Kushina glares at the woman behind the counter. Kushina-san Gara whimpers next to her, her head below the top of the counter. Kushina spares Gara a quick glance, smiling at the girl in spite of the situation. The old hag is intentionally raising the price of her clothes because Gara is here. Placing her hand on the top of the clothes pile, a blue glow coming from beneath her palm. Sell me these at a normal price and there won't be a problem. Kushina growls at the shopkeeper, her voice promising retribution. Are you threatening me? The shopkeeper defiantly growls and Kushina's hand comes up, her fingers wrapped around the hilt of a kunai. The tip of the knife stops just before it pierces the woman's neck, the old woman freezing in terror at the sight of the weapon pressed to her throat. Both Naruto and Gara's eyes go wide at the sight of the knife, Gara taking a step back in surprise. Naruto just stares, his eyes fixed on the knife held in his mother's normally loving hand. Kushina-san, don't hurt her. The sand around Gara's feet swirls in agitation, Gara clutching the bear closer to her chest insecurely. Well? Kushina growls, her knife hand as steady as a rock, her gaze as cold as an experienced killer. Fine. The woman agrees, barely whispering the words out of fear of piercing her neck. Kushina lowers the knife, putting her hand on top of the pile of clothes again, her hand glowing a faint chakra blue again before she pulls her hand back. I'm glad you saw reason. Kushina seethes toward the woman. Now, how much for these clothes? 200 cause. The woman says, putting her hand to her throat where the kunai was a moment ago. Kushina merely nods, reaching into her pocket and withdrawing her wallet, paying for the clothes before the woman bags them. Let's go Gara-chan, Naruto. Kushina says as she scoops up the bags. Both of the children follow the Uzumaki woman as she leaves the shop and the woman behind the counter watches her go, her eyes never once leaving the back of Kushina's head until she and her children have left the store. Back out in the street Kushina walks away from the store for several blocks before stopping and turning around, looking at both of her children casually. Okay Gara-chan, are you sure you don't want new bed clothes? The little redhead shakes her head no empathically, looking down at the teddy bear in shame. I don't want you to cause trouble for me. She admits in a tiny voice. I'm not worth it. Kushina narrows her eyes at the red-haired Jinchuriki, a scowl coming to her features, while Naruto stares at the girl in open surprise. Don't talk like that Gara-chan. Kushina scolds her. Gaara looks up at her adopted mother a moment and then down again in shame, her eyes drifting to Naruto, who looks at her in open surprise. "Why would you say that about yourself, Gaara-chan?" Naruto asks curiously. "Well, it's what everyone says about me. They say I'm worthless and that it would be better if I weren't born." "That's horrible, Gaara-chan," Naruto says with a shake of his young head. "Do you believe that?" Gaara nods her head slowly, staring down at the ground in shame, her sadness hanging over her like a palpable cloud. "These people, they treated an innocent girl like that just because she has a demon sealed inside her." Kushina shakes her head as she stares at the girl, watching Gaara's eyes flicker from Naruto's face to the ground and back again. "No one's ever really treated me like you have before, Naruto-kun." Gaara continues in a small voice. "Even Uncle Yashimaru never denied what the other villagers were saying about me." "Well, it isn't true," Naruto says, reaching out and thrusting his fist forward non-threateningly. "You're a good person and you've got an amazing ability that no one else does." Lowering his arm, Gaara looks up at Naruto, fragile hope in her emerald eyes. "Do you really mean that, Naruto-kun?" "Absolutely. I was really tempted to have him say believe it." Gaara mutters, not knowing what to say to the first positive encouragement she's ever received. "I agree with Naruto." Kushina chimes in, setting the bags of clothes down and then walking toward Gaara before kneeling down in front of the redhead. Kushina, bringing her eyes to Gaara's level. "You aren't worthless and I think you're a good person. You helped Naruto out at the park and the person those people think you are wouldn't do that." "Thank you both," Gaara quietly sobs, tears at the edges of her eyes. Smiling at the girl, Kushina pulls the 6-year-old into a warm embrace, the young girl crying against Kushina's blouse for a few moments. Sniffling, Gaara wipes at her eyes after a few seconds and Kushina opens her arms, allowing the girl to step back and look her adopted mother in the eyes. For the first time, Gaara actually smiles, the expression stiff and unfamiliar to her, but both Naruto and Kushina are relieved to see her smile. "I'm really glad I met both of you," Gaara says, still holding her bear, glancing from Kushina and then to Naruto. "I'm glad I met you too, Gaara-chan." Naruto chimes in, grinning uncomfortably and scratching at the back of his head. "Let's go," Kushina says with a nod. "Since Gaara doesn't need bed clothes, we can just go home for now." "Sure, Mom." Naruto happily agrees. Returning home, Kushina helps Gaara store the clothes in her bedroom's closet before walking downstairs to prepare lunch. Chopping up vegetables she bought yesterday before taking Naruto to the park, Kushina drops them into a stew, using the side of the kitchen knife to push the chopped ingredients into the stew pot on top of the stove. Knock, knock, knock. The sound makes Kushina blink in surprise. She isn't expecting a visitor today, and most people don't just drop by without a reason. Probably a bomb or some other threat waiting outside the door to try and hurt me for taking in the village pariah. Kushina thinks as she walks to the door. Stopping at the door, Kushina takes a deep breath and blows it out, feeding chakra into her senses, heightening them ever so slightly, the slight difference, literally the difference between life and death. Opening the door, Kushina is not greeted by a bomb or an assassin or an angry mob of irate villagers looking to skin her alive. Instead, 2 children stand there, a boy and a girl. The girl has blonde hair tied into 4 ponytails at the back of her head, dressed in a white sleeveless blouse and a knee-length black miniskirt. She has fishnets covering the exposed areas of her arms and legs, and her dark eyes possess the smug self-confidence of someone raised in a family of high standing. The boy is dressed head to toe in black, his short dark brown hair spiky and unkempt, his dark eyes set straight ahead. "Can I help you?" Kushina asks formally, keeping her eyes locked on both of the children, watching the 2 of them suspiciously. "Hello," the girl says while smiling amicably in spite of Kushina's less than friendly welcome. "My name is Tamari and this is my younger brother Kankuro. I was told this is where I can find my younger sister Gaara." "Siblings?" Kushina eyes them a moment, her eyes shifting from the girl to the boy, searching for any sign that the girl is lying, but the girl is relaxed and open, both of them have their guard down and aren't expecting anything violent to happen or planning to do anything violent. "Gaara-chan never mentioned any siblings." Kushina retorts dryly and Tamari nods, her eyelids drooping ever so slightly. "We were never really close to Gaara." Tamari explains with a hint of regret in her eyes. "Our father didn't want us to associate with her." "And you just did as he told you?" Kushina asks frostily, and the boy, Kankuro, scoffs. "Our father is the Kazuki, you moronic foreigner." He growls, and Tamari blinks in surprise, rounding on her sibling angrily. "Kankuro?" She growls at him, and the boy shrugs his shoulders, looking innocent. "What?" "It's the truth that this woman and her child aren't from here," he says innocently, and Tamari shakes her head. "Just because she wasn't born here doesn't mean you can insult her." Tamari rebukes her younger brother. "She's a citizen of this village and has taken Gaara into her home and adopted her, show her some respect." "Respect?" Kankuro asks incredulously. "She'd have to be crazy to want to have Gaara around. Doesn't she know what Gaara is?" "I know Gaara has a demon sealed inside of her." Kushina answers him, causing both Tamari and her younger brother to blink in surprise at her open frankness about Gaara's curse. I also know that the people of this village have been treating her absolutely terrible, and you're all lucky that she has even a shred of kindness left in her. If you wish to speak to her I'll let you, but I won't have you demeaning her or speaking badly of her. Tamari nods her affirmation, and Kankuro shrugs his shoulders dismissively. Fine, whatever. Kankuro agrees, and Kushina steps aside allowing both of the children of the Kazakiyage into her home. Both Tamari and Kankuro stop in the foyer, removing their shoes they look around the relatively modest home. You have a nice home. Tamari says amicably. Thank you. Kushina says cordially. Gaara and my son Naruto are playing in the backyard, the two of you can wait in the living room here while I go get her. Kushina explains, motioning toward the living room. Tamari nods, walking toward the living room. Kankuro remains rooted to the spot a moment and Tamari turns around, grabbing her younger by the ear. Come on. Tamari growls, pulling Kankuro's ear, soliciting a yelp of pain from her younger brother. Ow. Cut that out Tamari. Kankuro protests as his older sister drags him into Kushina's living room. Once the two of them sit down Kushina walks to the rear of the house, looking out the rear door at her backyard. Her home, like nearly every other home in the village, has 6-foot-high concrete walls surrounding it. Not only does this afford families privacy, but also act as windbreaks. The name Land of Wind is not just a name, after all. Gaara stands in the backyard, Naruto facing the ground doing push-ups with a perfectly shaped cube of sand on his back. Naruto's muscles flex as he raises his body, and Gaara holds her right hand out, controlling the sand on his back, while her left hand still holds her ever-present teddy bear. Opening the back door Kushina raises her voice to call out to both of her children. Naruto, Gaara, time to come in. Kushina calls out to both of them, and to the young girl's credit the cube on Naruto's back doesn't immediately dissolve. Just a sec. Naruto calls out, lowering himself to the ground and doing one final push-up before he looks at Gaara. Okay, go ahead Gaara-chan. The redhead nods her understanding before she lowers her hand, and the cube on Naruto's back suddenly loses shape and flows smoothly off of his back and into the ground. With the weight gone Naruto jumps to his feet, grinning happily in spite of his recent workout. Thanks Gaara-chan. Naruto says with a smile. That ability of yours is really handy. Gaara pauses as though searching for the words, her cheeks flushing ever so slightly before she looks away from the blonde boy. You're welcome Naruto-kun. Naruto starts back toward the house and Gaara follows, eventually falling into step with him and walking next to him. She now holds her bear to her chest with both arms, a small amount of sand still following her as she walks toward the house, the two children stepping inside the house as Kushina closes the door. Lunch ready already? Naruto asks casually and Kushina shakes her head no. Lunch will be a little, actually Gaara-chan your brother and sister are both here to see you. Naruto blinks in surprise, glancing to Gaara to see her eyes drop to the floor. Brother and sister? Naruto asks casually and Gaara nods guiltily, like she's admitting to a horrendous crime. They're technically my older siblings, but I haven't seen or spoken to them in over a year. Not really close eh? Sounds like the understatement of the century. Kushina thinks to herself, keeping her face neutral. They're waiting in the living room, why don't you go introduce yourself Naruto? Kushina suggests, and Gaara's eyes go wide in surprise. He doesn't have to do that. Gaara quickly speaks up. I'm sure they're here for some other reason, they never just want to speak to me. Kushina narrows her eyes suspiciously, making a decision. Wait here a moment, both of you. Walking into the kitchen Kushina turns down the heat on the stove to a bare simmer, preventing the stew from boiling over or burning while she's otherwise occupied. Walking back to where Naruto and Gaara still stand, Kushina nods toward Gaara, flipping her long red hair behind her shoulders with her hands. I'll come with you. Kushina explains to her. If they have some other reason for being here, as your mother it's my business too. Mother? Gaara whispers the word as though it is sacrosanct, looking up at Kushina as she smiles down at the little girl. I'm your mother now Gaara-chan. Kushina says benevolently. No matter what happens I'll protect you and care for you. How you mean that? She asks in a tiny voice and Kushina puts her hands on her hips. You're my daughter Gaara-chan. We might not be blood related, but there's more to family than genetics and I consider you as much as my child as I do Naruto. Naruto grins, wrapping his arms around his adopted sister reassuringly. We're family Gaara-chan, and family help each other, so I'm with you too. Gaara blushes at the familiar contact, clearly a little uncomfortable with Naruto's arm around her. She isn't used to people treating her like they really care about her. Kushina keeps her thoughts from her face, instead smiling in spite of it all. Let's go Gaara-chan. Kushina says suggestively. They're waiting for us. Gaara nods, and together the three of them walk into the living room together, Gaara and Naruto next to one another with Kushina behind them. Both Tamari and Kankuro have been sitting on Kushina's sofa, Tamari careful to keep her brother from getting up and poking around. The one time he starts to stand, she grabs him by the ear and pulls him back down, telling him not to poke his head where it doesn't belong. When the three of them enter, Tamari is the first to notice and she quickly elbows Kankuro in the side, her younger sibling staring off into space in boredom. He blinks at the jab and quickly glances at his older sister, seeing not only Gaara but also Kushina and another boy who must be the son she mentioned. Tamari takes a look at the young boy and smiles, his pretty blue eyes and his blonde hair a perfect match as he strides into the room, and Tamari watches him walk a moment, temporarily distracted by Kushina's son, and Kushina does not miss Tamari staring at her son until Gaara speaks. Tamari Wani-chan, Kankuro Ani-chan. Gaara says by way of greeting. Both Tamari and Kankuro look at their younger sibling, appraising her carefully, and Kushina watches the both of them in turn, her own suspicions telling her that both of Gaara's older siblings are in fact here for another reason other than to simply see their younger sister. "Hello Gaara, you look well." Tamari says pleasantly. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine." Gaara says, looking down past the bear clutched against her chest and toward a spot on the floor. "Kushina-san has been really kind to me." "That's good. I'm glad that you found someone who will take care of you." Tamari explains, turning her eyes to Naruto. "You must be Uzumaki Naruto-san, right?" "Yep." Naruto answers her enthusiastically. "Remember my name, because I'm gonna be a great ninja better than anyone else." Tamari giggles at the adolescent declaration, and Kankuro scoffs sarcastically. "Yeah, you and ever other wannabe shinobi blondie." Kankuro sneers at him, and Tamari glares angrily at her younger brother. "Kankuro, you know better." She scolds him, and he sighs, his shoulders sagging and he shakes his head wearily. Yeah. Tamari turns her head back toward Gaara, smiling amicably in spite of her younger brother's blatantly rudeness and lack of decorum. "Anyway, I'm glad that you found someone to take care of you, Gaara. Our late uncle would be happy to know that you finally found a loving family." "Late uncle?" Kushina thinks to herself, her eyes shifting to Gaara to watch the young Jinchuriki's reaction. The girl's green eyes go wide in response to Tamari's statement, her lips quivering in fear. "Late uncle?" Gaara asks in a quavering voice. Chapter 4. Tamari blinks in surprise, clearly expecting her younger sister to have known that her late caretaker is dead. "You didn't know Uncle Yashimaru was dead?" Tamari asks curiously, tilting her head to the side. Kushina's right hand grasps Gaara's shoulder, her green eyes falling to the ground, the sand around her feet shifting in agitation. Naruto half turns toward his adopted sister, speaking in a low voice. "Gaara-chan." Naruto whispers and tears form at the edges of her eyes, her arm squeezing the teddy bear closer to her chest, her shoulders sagging, her entire body seeming to shrink before them. "It's okay Gaara-chan." Kushina begins softly, looking down at her adopted daughter solemnly. "You aren't alone." Sniffling, Gaara just clutches her bear to her chest, her entire body trembling in sadness at the news of her uncle's passing. Tamari and Kankuro look on in silence, the elder blonde daughter of the Kazuki-age watching with guarded interest, while Kankuro couldn't look less interested in his younger sister's emotional response to the news of their uncle's death. "I'm sorry Gaara-chan." Naruto says somberly, reaching out to touch her forearm. The little girl sniffles, looking up at Naruto, her green eyes overflowing with sadness. "Thank you, Naruto-kun," Gaara manages in a small whisper, and the blue-eyed blonde nods, lowering his hand from her arm, Kushina's motherly hand still on Gaara's shoulder. "I think we should go." Tamari begins wisely, ducking her head to Naruto and then Kushina. "It was a pleasure to meet you both." An elbow from Tamari causes her younger brother to wince in pain. "Yeah, it was nice to meet you both." Kankuro says stiffly. "I'll show you both out." Naruto says smartly, and Kushina smiles at her observant son. Naruto motions for both Tamari and Kankuro to follow him, and the older blonde girl smiles at him. "Thank you for having us in your home, Uzumaki-san." Tamari says to Kushina, who merely nods her head to Tamari before the blonde girl follows Naruto out of the room with her younger brother close behind. Once both Tamari and Kankuro are gone, Kushina moves around Gaara, kneeling down in front of her. Kushina meets her adopted daughter's eyes. "I'm sorry Gaara." Kushina says somberly, and Gaara sniffles, tears coming down her cheeks unbidden. "I can't believe he's dead," Gaara whimpers in a low whisper, and Kushina embraces her daughter. "He might be dead, but your memories of him aren't." Kushina says solemnly, pulling back to look her daughter in the eyes. "He'll always be in your heart Gaara-chan, no matter anyone does or says, he'll always be in your heart, just like my husband will always be in mine." Reaching out with her hand, Kushina wipes Gaara's eyes with her fingers, the 6-year-old Jinchuriki meeting her adopted mother's gaze, Gaara's green eyes curious and hopeful. "Is that true?" Kushina nods solemnly, placing her hand gently over the bear's head where Gaara's roughly is. "It's absolutely true Gaara-chan. No one can take your memories of your uncle, not me, not Naruto, not the Kazuki-age, anyone." Gaara slowly nods. Looking down at the top of her bear, Kushina can see the little girl begin to accept the loss of her uncle, her grip on the bear relaxing somewhat, her shoulders straightening. "Thank you, Kushina-san. That's no way to talk to your mother, Gara-chan." Kushina mock scolds her. A slight smile comes to the red-haired Jinchuriki's lips. "Thank you, Aka-san." Leading the progeny of the Kazuki-age to the door, Naruto opens it for the two older children, Kankuro slipping his feet into his sandals and walking out without a word, Temari pausing at the door, looking Naruto up and down. "It was nice to meet you, Naruto-kun." Temari smiles at him, and Naruto shifts uncomfortably under the older girl's gaze. "It was nice meeting you too, Sabaku-san." Naruto says formally, and Temari smiles amicably. "Oh, you needn't speak so formally to me. You can just call me Temari." "I suppose Temari-san," Naruto says uncomfortably, and Temari smiles again, clearly pleased at Naruto's calling her by her first name. "Temari." Kankuro calls from outside, clearly annoyed at his older sister. The older girl scowls in annoyance, glaring out the door toward the source of the noise. "Unfortunately, I have to go now. I'll see you later, Naruto-kun." Temari says with a bow of her head, and Naruto returns the gesture. "Good day, Temari-san." Stepping out, Temari smiles at Naruto before she leaves the house, and Naruto closes the door, his thoughts on Gaara as he strides back into the living room, finding his mother and his adopted sister standing in the middle of the room. They're both gone. Naruto says casually, and Kushina nods toward him. "Thank you, Naruto," she says before she turns her gaze down to Gaara. "Lunch is practically finished, so why don't the both of you get cleaned up and we'll eat?" Gaara nods her head solemnly, her twin red pigtails bobbing at the side of her head, and Naruto gives Kushina a thumb up. Sitting in his office, the Kazuki-age closes his eyes, taking a calming breath and focusing his mind, finding his center and separating himself from the pain throbbing across his face and chest. After suffering grievous wounds at the hands of his brother-in-law Yashimaru, he quickly declared the village administration building off limits and saw a doctor. The doctor calmly informed him that he was lucky to be alive, and had he been any other man, the bomb blast probably would have killed him, but thanks to his unparalleled skill with wind element jutsu, he was able to protect himself and prevent the assassin from accomplishing his task. Too bad he died in the attempt. The traitor deserved to be tortured for what he's done. Hazuki-Sama, a shinobi's voice whispers into the room from the door. "Your children have returned. Very good." The Kazuki-age says sagely, his face hidden behind a veiled hat and veil wall. "Send them in." "Yes, Kazuki-Sama." The shinobi ducks out then, and a few moments later both Temari and Kankuro walk into the room. Both of his children drop to one knee, bowing their heads in supplication to their father. "We're returned as instructed, Kazuki-Sama." Temari explains stoically, her tone like a subordinate speaking to her superior, not the tone of a daughter speaking to her father. "What do you have to report?" "We went to the home of Uzumaki Kushina as you ordered, Kazuki-Sama." Temari reports. "And what did you find there?" Both Temari and Kankuro remain with their heads bowed, still kneeling before their father. Both Uzumaki Kushina and Uzumaki Naruto have acclimated to referring to Gaara as a member of their family. When I brought up the subject of Yashimaru's death, Gaara reacted negatively, as though she was unaware of his passing. Immediately both Kushina and Naruto moved to comfort her without hesitation. Behind his veils, the Kazuki-age's face remains neutral, his right cheek and his chest covered in bandages. "So, you would say that Gaara has accepted the death of her uncle without any incident?" In truth, the Kazuki-age had been more than a little worried that Gaara would take the death of her uncle rather negatively, and with all her power, it would very dangerous to keep her in the village, which is one of the reasons that he approved Kushina's adoption request. If the red-haired foreigner wants to take on the burden of the village's pariah and can raise her to be a powerful shinobi, then he's more than willing to give her the opportunity. Plus, if the girl truly is a murderer, she'll be most likely to kill those closest to her, and it would be no great loss if the village lost both Uzumaki family members. "Yes, Kazuki-Sama." Temari agrees with her father, and he nods. "Very well, you're both dismissed." Both Temari and Kankuro bow their heads in supplication. "Of course, Kazuki-Sama." The two of them speak in unison. "Are you sure this is okay, Naruto-kun?" Gaara asks in a small voice, and Naruto grins at his sister. "Of course. Mom's busy, so we're free to do whatever we want." Standing on Naruto's back, Gaara looks down past her bear at her adopted brother, holding her teddy bear close to her chest. Naruto lies with his arms bent at the elbows, doing push-ups with his new sister standing on his back. "I don't want you to hurt yourself, you have already trained a lot today." "This is nothing, Gaara-chan." Naruto says as he does a push-up, his voice never once faltering as he lowers himself to the ground and then pushes himself up. "Mom normally makes me do 100 a day, along with 100 sit-ups, and I have to run around the district 4 times. She makes him train that much. Do you want to train that much, Naruto-kun? Don't you get tired of it?" "It isn't that I train every day." Naruto says as he does another push-up. I spend time at the park with other kids and go out and have fun just like other people, but I want to live up to my father's legacy, and that means I have to be strong, which means I have to train. Well, I'll help you however I can, Naruto-kun. Are you sure this is okay, Gaara-chan? Naruto asks worriedly. I mean, you just learned about your uncle, and Gaara feels a momentary stab of sadness at the mention of her uncle, but the feeling quickly passes, Kushina's words to her coming back to her. He'll always be in your heart, Gaara-chan, no matter anyone does or says, he'll always be in your heart, just like my husband will always be in mine. It's alright, Naruto-kun. It's actually nice to have something to do, so I don't mind helping you. Okay. Naruto says as he lowers himself once more before he pushes himself up. I'm done now, Gaara-chan. Gaara immediately steps off of his back, allowing Naruto to hop up to his feet, a grin coming to his face. You want to spar, Gaara-chan? I don't know how good you are in a fight, but I've been working on my taijutsu, and I really need someone to practice with. Gaara's emerald eyes lower, and the young Jinchuriki can't help but shake her head. I don't know if I'll be a very good sparring partner, Naruto-kun. Naruto's blonde eyebrows rise curiously, tilting his head to one side. What do you mean, Gaara-chan? Lowering her eyes, Gaara's voice is suddenly weary and tired. Try and hit me. The blonde Uzumaki stands there, staring at her a moment in surprise. Really? Naruto asks curiously, and Gaara's red hair bobs. Go ahead, Naruto-kun, I promise I won't fight back, go ahead. I shouldn't put your bear down, or at least look at me. Naruto asks curiously, and Gaara closes her eyes. It's okay, Naruto-kun, go ahead. It'll be fine. For a moment Naruto just stares at her, then with a shrug the blonde boy sucks in a breath and blows it out, spreading his feet in a fighting stance, raising his hands. Alright, here I come. Naruto announces to her, and Gaara just nods. Coiling his knees, Naruto lunges, pulling his fist back to hit Gaara in the chest. Naruto thrusts his fist forward, only to have a wall of dense sand shoot up between his fist and Gaara's body, stopping the punch just before it strikes his adopted sister. Pulling his fist back, Naruto watches as the sand falls, and he looks at Gaara curiously. The red-haired girl hasn't moved a muscle, and even her eyes are closed. Naruto coils his leg back and thrusts it forward, again a wall of sand rising up and intercepting his foot, stopping it before he can touch his adopted sister. Pulling his foot back, Naruto stares at his sister a moment, wondering it's something to do with her ability to see him and moving the sand to protect her. But she isn't even looking at me. How can she be using the sand against me if she can't even see my attack? To test the theory, Naruto moves around behind Gaara, pulling his fist back to hit her from behind, and once again a wall of sand pops up between his fist and her skin, stopping him from hitting her. Pulling his fist back, Naruto steps back, looking his adopted sister up and down. Gaara-chan, how are you doing that? Naruto asks with awe in his voice. That isn't me doing it, Naruto-kun. Gaara explains as she turns around, her eyes locked on the ground between them. The sand moves on its own, independent of my will. No one has been able to hurt me my entire life. So, the sand protects you, even if you want to get hit? Naruto asks curiously, and Gaara nods her head guiltily. Yes, no matter what, the sand always protects me. Even when I'm asleep, the sand is always there and always protecting me. That's cool, Gaara-chan. Naruto grins and Gaara blinks in surprise. Yeah, you don't think that it's strange? No. I mean, you have the ability to control sand, so why is it strange that sand would move on its own to protect you? Everyone always said that I was different and they used any excuse to make me feel horrible, and Gaara trails, her eyes dropping at the memory. Smiling, Naruto approaches her and puts his hand on her shoulder. Well, I think it's cool, and anyone who says you're a monster or tries to make you feel bad, I'll kick their head in. Emerald eyes blink in surprise, looking up at Naruto scandalously. I don't want you to get in trouble for me, Naruto-kun. Gaara begins, only to be cut off by the blonde boy standing across from her. Don't say you aren't worth it, Gaara-chan. Naruto reprimands her, and the little redhead looks away then. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, it's just. I know, but you aren't all alone anymore, and I don't want to hear you put yourself down. Mom doesn't want to hear it and I don't either. Naruto-kun. You wish to speak to me, Hokage-sama. Huffing on his pipe, Sarutobi exhales the acrid smoke, the pipe smoke wafting out the open window of the Hokage's office. Standing in his office, Sarutobi is dressed in the robes of the Hokage, the village that he loves so much at night before him. Beyond that, the Hokage mountain where his face and the face of his predecessor and successor is carved into the rock. On the other side of his desk, a certain Anbu stands with his hands behind his back, his raven mask concealing his face, his long dark hair tied into a ponytail. Yes, Itachi. Sarutobi says solemnly, his voice weary and tired. Tell me, has anything changed? No, Hokage-sama. Itachi says curtly. My father and the men of my clan are still plotting to overthrow the village government and take control. Do you feel that they will in fact go through with this coup, Itachi? Sarutobi asks hopefully, a part of him truly hoping that the Anbu Uchiha will say something to give the Hokage an option other than ordering a bloodbath. Yes, Hokage-sama. Itachi reports emotionlessly, the Anbu captain keeping his sorrow inside. You are one of my most trusted subordinates, Itachi. Were the Uchiha clan to remain loyal to this village, I'm sure you'd be a candidate for Hokage. That's very flattering, Hokage-sama. Itachi says curtly. However, I'm afraid that the clan will not be loyal for much longer. There is dissension amongst the revolutionaries as to how power will be divided once the coup is over, particularly who will become Hokage. This village has already lost much, Itachi-san. Not only did we lose Minato that terrible night 6 years ago, but we've also lost Kushina and the Kyuubi. Our village cannot survive if the Uchiha clan is annihilated, nor can it stand if the Uchiha revolt and more shinobi are lost. Standing there, Itachi can feel a small spring of hope at his superior's words. If I may offer a possible compromise, Hokage-sama. Turning to look over his shoulder at the Anbu Uchiha, Sarutobi nods permissively, turning his gaze out the window, taking another puff from his pipe. Go ahead, Itachi. Not all of the clan is involved in the coup, many of the men involved don't want their families aware of their plans, out of fear that their families may speak out to protect themselves or their children. So, you could bring the entirety of the village's shinobi down on the revolutionaries. If you spare those who weren't involved, it would prevent the entire destruction of the clan and would ingratiate them to you, show them that you can be merciful. And what of the remaining clan members? Won't they harbor a desire for revenge at seeing their clan leaders exterminated? I will explain the situation to them, Hokage-sama, they will see the truth. Taking another puff from his pipe, Sarutobi looks out toward the Hokage mountain, in particular to the face of the fourth Hokage there. What would you do, Minato? So much has happened since you died, your wife and your son have left us, and now the Uchiha clan is threatening to overthrow the village. I'm placing a great deal of faith in you, Itachi. Sarutobi says solemnly. I'll go with your suggestion. Thank you, Hokage-sama. At night, members of the Anbu Special Forces move across the Leaf Village, shadows flowing over shadows, they all converge on a single building, the home of Uchiha Fugaku, the meeting site of the Uchiha revolutionaries. Kakashi-senpai, we're in position. An Anbu named Yamato reports to his commander. The silver-haired Anbu raises his hand to his ear, triggering the radio with his finger. We move in 15 seconds. Kakashi responds, opening his left eye behind his mask. Here we go. We're all agreed. Then Uchiha Fugaku stands before the gathered heads of his clan, his son Itachi standing next to him. In front of him, the gathered men of the Uchiha clan slowly nod, all of them agreeing to the motion brought before them by Fugaku, that they'll stage their coup in exactly 1 month, and that starting tomorrow they'll begin to move covertly, setting things in motion to go as smoothly as possible in their favor on that day. Fugaku turns his gaze to his eldest son, the boy standing next to him as silent as a corpse. Itachi, is something bothering you? You've been quiet this evening. Itachi spares his father a glance, his dark eyes weary and tired. I've been rather busy as of late. Itachi responds tiredly. My work for the Hokage has been stressful. You only have to bear with that for another month, my son. Once we've taken our rightful place as leaders of this village, I promise that you'll never have to do whatever it is you're doing for the Hokage that's placed under such stress again. If only you knew, father. The doors at the far end of the room fly open, the third Hokage standing in the doorway, dressed in his battle garb with his hands together, flanked on either side by 5 Anbu ready to fight. By order of the Hokage, all of you are to be terminated for high treason against the Leaf Village. Sarutobi proclaims to them all. Fugaku can only stare for a moment in surprise, his mouth moving at the speed of his thoughts. Hokage-sama, what is the meaning of? Pain shoots through him, emanating from his kidneys. Looking down, Fugaku sees a kunai knife there, a hand clutching the hilt of the weapon. Following the hand, Fugaku's face falls when his eyes meet with Itachi's. I'm sorry, father. Itachi whispers solemnly. Itachi, how could you? It is as you said, father, I am the link between the Uchiha and the Leaf. I cannot allow you to destroy our clan and the village for your own selfish ambitions. This is the only way the clan can be saved. Itachi, how can you side with them? Staring his father in the eyes, Itachi's eyes change to the Sharingan and then into the Mangekyou Sharingan. Seeing his son's eyes, Fugaku's mouth opens in surprise. Itachi, Fugaku mutters, and Itachi turns the knife in his father's kidney. I killed Shisui. He died so that I could acquire this power, and now you will die so that the clan can be saved. The assembled men watch as Itachi pulls his kunai from his father's body before he swipes it through Fugaku's neck, separating his head from his shoulders. Fugaku-sama. One of them cries out, the majority of them reaching for weapons when their bodies freeze mid-movement, chakra wavering through the air. Paralysis jutsu. One of them asks, Sarutobi and the Anbu standing next to him all holding their hands in a hand sign, maintaining the jutsu. All of you will die by my hand. Itachi says mercilessly as his father's head falls, hitting the floor with a thud, the man's body close behind. Find solace in the fact that your deaths will save the lives of your wives and children. With blood on his kunai, Itachi strides toward the paralyzed Uchiha closest to him. Fugaku is not the last man to die at his hands this night. Days later, rumors begin to circulate through the elemental lands that the Uchiha clan of the Leaf underwent a drastic purge, the rumors claiming that the leadership of the clan wanted to overthrow the current village government and take control of the village for themselves. When Kushina gets word of this, she merely dismisses the rumor as just that, a rumor that has very little if any impact on her or her children. Is it true, Mom? I heard some other kids say that there was a problem in the Leaf village. Sitting at the table, both Naruto and Gaara look to their mother questioningly, and Kushina shrugs her shoulders, scooping a spoonful of miso soup into her spoon and blowing on it. I don't know, Naruto. I haven't heard anything more than you have. Looking down at her soup, Gaara fidgets nervously, her one arm holding her bear while her right arm holds her soup spoon. Is it true what they say about you, Aka-san? Gaara asks curiously. Did you really come here from the Leaf village? Kushina nods solemnly, putting her spoon to her lips and drinking the soup. Yes, that's right, Gaara-chan. Kushina says solemnly. Naruto was actually born there, though I am personally from the Whirlpool village. Whirlpool village? Gaara asks curiously, her eyes showing her surprise. I've never heard of that village before. Yeah, neither have I, Naruto agrees with Gaara. You've never brought it up before because the village was destroyed well before you were born, Naruto. Kushina says calmly. The Whirlpool is gone and most of the refugees from that village are living in the Leaf. But you came here because the Leaf didn't treat Naruto like you wanted. Gaara asks in a small voice, and Kushina nods her agreement. That's right. Why would all your people flee to the Leaf? Because the Uzumaki family founded the Whirlpool village and the Uzumaki and one of the founding clans of the Leaf, the Senju, are like distant cousins. The two villages were always close. Yet they turned on you like you didn't matter to them. Kushina nods solemnly. Yes, the people of the Leaf refused to recognize my connection to my husband, their fourth Hokage, so I took my son and left. It sounds like you turned your back on them, Gaara says in a small voice, and the bitter tone that comes to Kushina's voice surprises both her son and her newly adopted daughter. Not until after they turned their backs on me and the man who sacrificed himself to protect all of them. Kushina closes her eyes, remembering everything that happened that terrible night. Minato wanted them to all recognize that Naruto was his son, but once he was dead they turned their backs on him and spit all over his legacy. Glancing to her right, Gaara can't help but notice the concern in Naruto's eyes, nor does she miss the way Kushina speaks about her husband's legacy. She must mean the demon that he sealed into Naruto. His father wanted the entire village to look at him as a hero, but instead they turned on him. Sitting there, Gaara can't help but think about her own life. She can barely remember, but there was a time when the people of the village didn't talk about her in hushed voices and everyone didn't hate her. She can only imagine what life would be like if things were different, if she were in Naruto's shoes and living in another village where no one knows anything about her and she could be free to live however she wants. But even then, this sand follows me everywhere. At least Naruto can pass for normal, but who would think someone who's protected by sand is normal? You're still mad about it, aren't you, Aka-san? Naruto asks somberly, and Kushina closes her eyes wearily. Part of me is, yes. I spent all of my adult life until then and half my childhood in that village, and I thought I knew the people there. I thought they were better than that, but I was wrong. They weren't better than that, and everything my husband died for was in vain. I don't think it was in vain. Naruto says with a slight smile. I mean, it brought us here, and we're making a difference here, so. Gaara smiles a little at that, and Kushina sighs, opening her eyes and looking down at her bowl, taking another spoonful of soup to her lips before she speaks. I suppose you're right, Naruto. Kushina says with a sigh. Complaining about things won't change anything anyway. Naruto doesn't say anything to that, and neither does the red-haired Jinchuriki sitting next to him. A silence falls over the Uzumaki family for a long time, the three of them just enjoying their food until the proverbial light bulb goes off in Naruto's mind and the blonde Uzumaki remembers something that he's been meaning to speak to his mother about but with recent events has fallen on the back burner. The new semester starts at the Ninja Academy in 2 months, and you said that if I go you teach me something to help me in the academy. Naruto asks curiously, and Kushina blinks in surprise, having fully forgotten her promise to her son. I did say I would teach you something, didn't I? Kushina asks, and Naruto nods. Are you gonna teach me how you pulled that kunai out of nowhere in that shop? Naruto asks curiously, and Kushina shakes her head no. If you graduate the academy at the head of the class, I'll teach you how to do that. As for what I promised you, there is something I can teach you that if you can master it by the time you get into the academy, you'll have a secret weapon that no one will see coming. Naruto grins at his mother, his blue eyes wide at the prospect of learning a jutsu from his former Jounin mother, who never hesitates to remind him of her former status in the Leaf Village. Can you teach me now? Naruto asks impatiently, and Kushina shakes her head no. I'll start teaching you tomorrow, but you have to have patience. What I'm going to show you isn't something that you can pick up overnight, and it might take you until you graduate to master. I'll master it by the time I start the academy. Naruto says absolutely, and both Kushina and Gaara smile a little at the blonde boy's proclamation. We'll see, though for now finish your food. I'll start teaching you tomorrow morning, so wait until then. Naruto's face falls in disappointment, Kushina's young son remarkably easy to read. Okay, I'll wait till tomorrow, Naruto says with a pout, and Kushina shakes her head in exasperation. He can be so much like his father sometimes. Chapter 5. Enter Jiraiya. Flashback. Kushina, are you in here? Sarutobi's weary voice wafts into Kushina's ears. What do you want, Sarutobi? Kushina growls in disgust. It's been 2 days since the Kyuubi attacked the Leaf Village, and Kushina has been living out of a hospital room the entire time. The day before she'd been out and about, collecting on Minato's life insurance and buying the necessary supplies for a long-distance trip. She'd also gone to the wreckage that had once been her home with Minato, and it was exactly as Sarutobi had told her. The house had been razed, burned to the ground, and nothing but burnt wood and ashes remained of the once grand home. Her baby has been under Anbu guard the entire time, and Kushina has heard whispers from the people of the village talking about him. To them he isn't the hero of the village, the child of the 4th Hokage Minato Namikaze, instead he's the demon child, and the Kyuubi brat. She also hasn't seen hide or hair of Jiraiya, the man who'd agreed to be Naruto's godfather, and would take responsibility for him, should something happen to either Minato or her. I have something for you. Sarutobi says solemnly, his eyes tired and weary from having not slept more than 2 hours since the Kyuubi attacked. Standing over her bed, Kushina has a large hiking backpack standing on the bed, the red-haired woman stuffing supplies into the bag in preparation for the coming trip. I'm not going to stay here, Sarutobi, so whatever bribe you've prepared to try and convince me to change my mind isn't going to work. Kushina says resolutely. This isn't a bribe. Sarutobi sighs, shaking his head. Reaching into his robe, Sarutobi grasps a small scroll there and withdraws it, handing the sealed scroll to the red-haired Uzumaki. Momentarily pausing her packing effort, Kushina looks over her shoulder towards Sarutobi, the 3rd Hokage dressed in his normal robes, complete with hat. Her eyes flicker to the scroll held in Sarutobi's outstretched hand, a moment before her gaze rises, the look she sends toward the Hokage of the Hidden Leaf, a burning, skin-peeling glare. Then what is it then? Kushina asks suspiciously, and Sarutobi shakes his head, walking toward the bed and setting the scroll down on the bed near the foot of the hospital bed. This belonged to your husband. It wasn't in your home when the Kyuubi destroyed it. Kushina blinks in surprise. She wasn't aware of any of their property being outside their home when she'd gone into labor. The only people who'd been in the home were her and her husband. Sarutobi turns and slowly walks out, the 3rd Hokage stopping in the doorframe, a weary sigh escaping his aged lips. I really do wish you would reconsider your decision. This village is his home, and I know if you'd give it a chance it could become Naruto's home too. Kushina's gaze turns back to the pack, her eyes focusing on the hiking pack with absolute focus. You want me to stay here so I can see my son, Minato's legacy made into this village's pariah. It won't be like that, Kushina. The people of this village will accept Naruto for what he is in time, and then you'll be free to tell them all that he's Minato's true heir. Kushina shakes her head, her long red hair swaying behind her back. It doesn't matter what you think, Sarutobi, because you can't make people change how they feel, and even if I did tell everyone who Naruto is, they wouldn't up and accept him. It's just as you said, the ignorant masses of this village won't accept that my son is in any way related to their hero. I'm sorry, Kushina. Sarutobi apologizes. The council refuses to allow me to acknowledge your marriage to Minato, and their feelings are that Naruto cannot be connected to him in any way. They don't want to sully his memory in the eyes of the people. Sully his memory? Kushina squeezes her hands into fists, swallowing her anger at the thought that Naruto is somehow impure or dirty. I won't stay here, Sarutobi, Naruto deserves better, and I'm going to make sure he gets it. As you wish, Kushina. Sarutobi says with a heavy sigh. But that the 3rd Hokage strides out of the room, and Kushina's eyes drift to the scroll still sitting on the bed. Reaching out, she gingerly grasps the scroll and picks it up, opening the scroll and looking inside, recognizing the writing on the scroll as Minato's, and that they're directions. Instructions for how to teach a technique that he'd been working on before he passed away. This is, then flashback, sitting at her desk in the shed behind her home, Kushina reaches into one of the drawers beneath the desk. Grasping the scroll there, she slowly withdraws it, placing the scroll on the desk and slowly unrolling the scroll, looking at the beginning of the long explanation. I'll have to get my hands on some water balloons. I'll have to be careful with that. If people see me making a bunch of water balloons and Naruto popping them, then I'll get in trouble with the village government, and I really don't need that headache right now. Sighing, Kushina leans back in the chair, going over the instructions again, looking for anything else she might need before tomorrow. She'll need to get some rubber balls, as well as a bunch of regular balloons. This is going to be difficult for him. I know I've been making him do chakra control exercises for a while now, but this is a completely different level of control and manipulation. Sighing, Kushina rolls the scroll up on the desk, slipping it back into the drawer and closing it. Standing up, Kushina turns away from her desk and strides out of the shed. Closing the door to the shed behind her, Kushina looks around her backyard to see Gaara standing there, her left arm holding her bare to her chest, her right hand extended with her palm open. The sand in front of her slowly shifts and moves, Gaara's eyes closed in concentration. Naruto sits near her, his legs crossed and his hands together in a normal hand sign. He's working on his chakra control. She's doing something with the sand, maybe trying to create a technique that lets her shape the sand into something useful. Whatever else her Biju does, the fact that it protects her with the sand on its own is a major advantage. In a fight it would be almost impossible to physically hit her. Plus this entire village is surrounded by sand, if she can manipulate all of it at will, then she could destroy this entire place with a wave of her hand if she wanted. Then again, she can't sleep and she says she hears voices. It's too bad that there isn't some way to fix her seal, so she doesn't hear the demon whispering to her like that. The sand in front of Gaara rises, swirling up 5 feet into the air and pressing together. Gaara closes her fist, and the 2 sand piles seem to smash into each other with crushing force, the sand floating there in an odd jagged ball. Gaara lowers her hand and the sand loses cohesion, falling to the ground inert. Gaara opens her eyes, looking at the pile of sand that used to be held up by apparently her will, and now just lies there. As if feeling Kushina's eyes on her, Gaara turns and looks over her shoulder toward her adopted mother, looking at her from across the yard. Their eyes meet and Kushina smiles, the red-haired Jinchuriki returning the gesture, and Kushina walks inside, just as a familiar sound hits her ears. Ding dong, the sound of the doorbell draws Kushina's attention. Slipping her shoes off before stepping up into the hallway, Kushina strides toward the opposite side of the house, heading for the front door. Stopping at the front door, the Uzumaki woman slowly inhales and exhales, preparing herself to greet whoever her unannounced visitor is. Opening the door, a familiar sight hits her like a battering ram. Standing outside her door is a tall man with long spiky white hair tied back into a ponytail, with 2 shoulder-length set of bangs framing his face. Red lines run down his face from his dark eyes, a horned headband with the kanji for oil written on it. He wears a green short shirt kimono and matching green pants with a mesh armor shirt underneath the kimono, the mesh showing out of the sleeves of his kimono and his pants. He also wears a pair of handguard and a black belt, his ensemble complete with a red cloak that has 2 yellow circles on it and a large scroll on his back. Jiraiya, the infamous lecher of the Hidden Leaf Village, cracks a grin, waving at Kushina like the 2 of them are old friends. "Hey babe. How's it?" Slam. The Toad Sage is suddenly staring at the door again, and on the other side Kushina fumes, her right hand on the door, her left hand balled into a fist. Kushina can feel her fingernails digging into her palm, the pain nothing compared to the anger she feels boiling through her veins at the sheer arrogance that Jiraiya has, just showing up here after 6 years without even so much as a word. Ding dong. The doorbell goes off again, and Kushina grits her teeth, her hand drifting to the doorknob. She opens it, the so-called Toad Sage still standing there, the easygoing grin gone from his face. For that at least, Kushina is grateful. "What do you want, Jiraiya?" Kushina grounds at Naruto's godfather, the man crossing his arms over his chest, his face set in a grim line. "Do I need a reason to stop in and see a friend?" "Friend?" Kushina growls at him, and Jiraiya stands there, not at all surprised that Kushina is less than enthralled with seeing him after 6 years. "Yeah. I consider us friends, even though I admit it's been a long time." Jiraiya admits. "I know that I haven't been the best friend to you, but..." Kushina cuts him off, her glare cold enough to freeze a burning flame. "Yes, Jiraiya, you haven't been a good friend, and you've been an even worse godfather." Kushina reminds him, her voice a seething hiss. "I know, and I'm sorry, Kushina." Jiraiya somberly apologizes. "When Minato died it was like my own child had died, and I was just so heartbroken that I couldn't bring myself to be involved in Naruto's life. He had you, and I thought that it would be enough, so you just abandoned your godchild?" Kushina asks incredulously, and guilt shows in Jiraiya's eyes. "I know I made a mistake, and I'm going to do whatever I can to make up for it." "That isn't necessary." Kushina snaps at the man. "Naruto is fine, and he's going to be attending the ninja academy here in a few months, and I suspect that he's going to be the head of his class." "You've been training him?" Jiraiya asks curiously, raising an eyebrow in questioning. "Of course." Kushina answers matter-of-factly. "A few years ago he asked me about his father and I told him. Once he learned that his father was a great ninja, he asked me if I would help him be like his father." "I see," Jiraiya says thoughtfully, cupping his chin with his hand in some mockery of a person who is actually capable of deep thought. "Did you at least get the scroll I gave to sensei?" "He gave that to Sarutobi." "You gave the third the scroll with the instructions on how to learn the Rasengan?" Kushina asks in a low voice, and Jiraiya lowers his hand, nodding toward her. "Minato gave me the scroll a few weeks before that night. I managed to learn the technique a few days before he passed, and I was going to give it back to him when everything happened. So rather than give it to your precious student's wife directly, you give it to your old sensei and have him deliver it for you so you can disappear for 6 years and then show up like nothing's happened." Bill plays across the older man's face and Kushina feels a small amount of pride at the sight. She spent the last 6 years wondering how this man could just up and disappear on her. Kushina had been present when Minato had asked Jiraiya to be Naruto's godfather and Jiraiya had quickly agreed. Then, when he was actually needed, the man disappears for 6 years, leaving Kushina and his godchild to fend for themselves. "I said I'm sorry, Kushina." Jiraiya reminds her. "And you think that cuts it? You think you can just waltz up to my door, apologize that you abandoned the child Minato entrusted to you if something should happen to him, and I would just forgive you? I know that there's nothing I can say to make up for how I've acted, but at least believe me when I say that I mean to make up for it. Does the Kazekage know you're here?" Kushina asks heartlessly and Jiraiya blinks in surprise. The last 6 years he'd been traveling the world, crossing borders and maintaining his extensive network of contacts. He's been in every elemental land multiple times these last 6 years and crosses borders like it doesn't mean anything. He's snuck into nearly every hidden village, save the sand, and not thought anything of it. Technically he is a shinobi of the leaf and he's in another hidden village without the permission of the village's cage and without the consent of his cage. His presence could be considered an act of war by the leaf against the sand and the other 3 great nations would be inclined to back the land of wind against the land of fire. No, why would I go through the trouble of trying to come here legally when I can just as easily sneak in? It's a lot easier to just slip in unnoticed than it is to walk in brazenly declaring who I am. Because as a citizen of the land of wind, it is my duty to report to the village that a leaf shinobi has been here without the consent of the village government. How do you imagine the Kazekage would react to the news that a leaf shinobi has been in his village, spying on its inhabitants? Jiraiya stares at her uncomprehending. He expected Kushina to be angry at him, but never in his wildest dreams did he ever imagine that Kushina would threaten to use his presence to start a war between 2 hidden villages, almost immediately following the loss of nearly the entire Uchiha clan, the worst loss of military power the leaf has felt since the night Naruto was born. You know I'm not here to spy. I just want to make up for my mistakes and— Aka-san, who are you talking to? Naruto's voice drifts from the rear of the house. Jiraiya's eyes go wide at the sound of boy's voice and a moment later a blonde-haired blue-eyed boy rounds a corner behind Kushina. The boy followed closely by a red-haired green-eyed girl around his age, her long red hair tied into 2 ponytails, the little girl holding a gray teddy bear to her chest. Kushina glances at her children, turning her gaze back to Jiraiya, who stands there dumbstruck, staring at the blonde boy. That hair, those eyes, the resemblance is undeniable to the Toad Sage, and for a moment it's all he can do to just stare at Naruto, the first time Jiraiya has ever seen his godchild. He's just a man in need of directions. Kushina says dismissively, her violet eyes glaring at Jiraiya unforgiving. Swallowing the lump in his throat, Jiraiya pastes on a smile. "Yeah, thanks lady. I really appreciate the directions," he says with feigned appreciation. "Good day then," Kushina says dismissively, closing the door. Turning around, Kushina smiles at Naruto, the expression feigned, but she does her best to make it look sincere. "Well, how about I make dinner? What would you both like to eat?" Standing on the other side of the door, Jiraiya closes his eyes, tears flowing unbidden from his eyes down his cheeks. "I'm such an idiot," he whispers to himself. Putting his hands together, the Toad Sage of Mayaboku disappears in a puff of smoke. Sitting in his room, Sasuke Uchiha stares up at the ceiling. It's night outside and the window is open. Cool night air wafts into the room, though the second child of Fugaku Uchiha doesn't feel the least bit cold. It's been a week since he saw his father for the last time. His mother had come to him 6 days ago and told him that his father Fugaku was dead, killed by his older brother Itachi's hand. His mother Mikoto had explained that his father and the rest of the adult men of the clan had been planning a coup d'etat and were going to take over the village. Itachi had been acting as a double agent, working for the Hokage, and it was because of him that she was still alive, that all of Sasuke's aunts and cousins weren't included in the massacre. "Sasuke, dinner's ready." Mikoto calls from the kitchen, and Sasuke just lies on his bed, his left hand on his stomach, his right arm hanging at his side. The light in his room is off, so when the door slides open and light shines in from the hall, it momentarily blinds Sasuke for a moment, but his vision adjusts, and when he sees who it is standing in the doorway, his face contorts into a scowl. His older brother Itachi stands there, dressed in a sleeveless black shirt and black pants, with his long dark hair tied into a ponytail behind his head. By all rights, Itachi is now the head of the Uchiha clan, though there isn't even really a clan left to command. Nearly all of the shinobi of the clan were killed a week ago, and those few that were left are the genin children and a single female shinobi in her 20s, who is recently married and is currently on maternity leave, about to give birth to her first child. She hadn't been included in her father's plan because Fugaku didn't want any reprisals coming down on her and her unborn child. "Did you hear Aka-san say that dinner is ready?" Itachi asks calmly, and Sasuke looks away from his older brother in disgust. "Murdering traitor, I'm not hungry." Sasuke says simply, and Itachi narrows his eyes at his younger brother. I know that you are angry at me for what I've done, Sasuke, but I only did what I did to protect as many lives as possible. If not for me, Akase, you didn't have to kill him. Sasuke snaps at Itachi, rolling over and putting his back to his older brother. You only did what you did so you could be the clan head, you don't care about Akase or me or anyone else but yourself. Standing in the doorway, Itachi slowly shakes his head. He knows that Sasuke blames him for what's happened, and it is his deepest hope that in time Sasuke will come to understand what he's done and that he only did it to protect him and to prevent the clan from being wiped out. He'd only done it to protect Sasuke and his mother and the rest of their innocent loved ones. Please come to dinner, Sasuke. Itachi asks politely. Akase would really appreciate you being there. I told you I'm not hungry. Sasuke says stubbornly, and Itachi sighs in frustration. As you wish, Sasuke. Itachi assents, stepping back and closing the door behind him. Walking downstairs, Itachi hits the bottom of the steps, seeing his mother standing there wearing an apron, a concerned look in her dark eyes. Like Itachi, Mikoto has been worried about Sasuke, the fact that the second child of Uchiha Fugaku hasn't left his room and said 5 words to anyone other than Itachi has her deeply worried. She's concerned that Sasuke is going to react negatively and try to do something stupid like take revenge for his father or something even worse. Sasuke will not be joining us for dinner tonight, Akase. Itachi explains stoically, and Mikoto's gaze drops to the floor. I see. She whispers, and Itachi turns toward the dining room. We should eat while the food is warm. When we're done you can take a plate up to him. I'm sure he'll eat then. I hope so. Mikoto agrees as Itachi starts toward the dining room. I know that you did what you did for him, and I appreciate it. Stopping in the doorway to the dining room, Itachi merely nods. Let's eat, Akase. Chapter 6. Standing in the backyard of his home, Naruto holds a water balloon in his hands, his face contorted in concentration. Clutching the balloon in both hands, Naruto tries to spin the chakra in several different directions at once, causing the balloon to burst. He's managed to go through several balloons, but none of them burst like they were supposed to, instead the water would break out of only one side and drain the balloon. Sitting on the steps, Gaara clutches her bear to her chest, her green eyes watching as Naruto stares down at the balloon with frustrated concentration. A glance down reveals 3 other balloons lying at his feet. It's only been 3 balloons today. Yesterday he went through 10 of them after the same amount of time. Does that mean that he's been getting better? The morning before, Kushina brought Naruto outside and told him that she was finally going to teach him a new technique. Naruto had been ecstatic at the prospect of learning something new, and Kushina had been patient. She told him that in order to learn the new technique, he would have to learn to burst a water balloon using only his chakra. She'd shown him what he would have to do, and in a few short seconds she'd caused a water balloon to burst right in front of both of him. She'd given Naruto a bucket full of balloons and watched him burst the first, watching calmly as Naruto popped it with only a single stream of water flowing out the side. Kushina had reprimanded him, telling him that he has to literally blow it apart rather than just pop it, and Naruto nodded. Then Naruto had gone to work on the remaining 25 balloons in the bucket, popping each one with only his chakra, apparently making no progress as he pops each balloon in nearly the same way. Kushina had told him when he could finally burst a balloon like she showed him to come find him and sequestered herself in her shed to work. The rest of the day Naruto spent practically rooted to same spot in the middle of the yard, trying again and again to burst a balloon using only his chakra. You should take a break, Naruto-kun. Gaara says from the step, her gaze taking in the sweat covering his brow and cheeks, his face still contorted in concentration. I'm okay, Gaara-chan. Naruto says with an easy grin, wiping his forehead with his forearm, never once letting go of the balloon in his hands. Sitting there, Gaara watches as Naruto closes his eyes, the balloon gently shifting in his hands as Naruto tries to spin his chakra inside the small sphere. Watching it, Gaara can't tell that it isn't going to be long before the balloon pops or Naruto's concentration gives out. Pop. Crap. Sitting there, Gaara watches as the water slowly drains from a small hole in the side of the balloon, the sand at Naruto's feet darkening as it absorbs the water. Shaking her head, Gaara slowly stands up, approaching her adopted brother with her bear in her arms, her red hair tied into twin pigtails. Take a break, Naruto-kun. You've been at it since you woke up this morning. Gaara says gently, reaching out and touching Naruto's right arm. Sighing, Naruto drops the now empty water balloon to the sand at his feet. Looking down, sweat slowly drips off Naruto's nose, splattering on the now moist sand. I feel like I'm so close, Naruto mutters, wiping his face with his bare arm. It's harder than it looks. It's okay, Naruto-kun. Gaara assures him quietly. You've got nearly 2 months before we start the academy. I know. Naruto agrees with a nod. I just want to figure this out. Mom said that Dad made this technique and it's supposed to be really powerful. I don't doubt it, Naruto-kun, but you won't be able to learn anything if you fall over because you're dehydrated. Standing there, Naruto's blue eyes blink once, an epiphany coming to his blue eyes. Yeah, you're right. He agrees with resignation in his voice. Leading Naruto inside, Gaara watches him carefully as the two of them walk through the door, the two of them taking off their shoes before walking into the house. Walking into the dining room, Gaara motions for Naruto to sit at the table. "Sit down, Naruto-kun, I'll get you something to drink," she offers while pulling the chair back for her brother. "Thank you, Gaara-chan." Naruto hoarsely replies, his voice showing just how dehydrated he is. Standing in the middle of the desert under the hot sun for several hours at a time, sweating and not drinking anything can make a person dehydrated. Even though Naruto was doing nothing but stand there and concentrate, he was using his chakra and trying to burst a balloon in his hands. Setting her bear down on the table, Gaara walks to the refrigerator and opens it before reaching inside, grasping a pitcher of water and setting it on the table before she goes to the appropriate cabinet, using her sand as a stepping stone to reach the cabinet containing their glasses. Grasping a glass from inside, Gaara steps down from the sand step stool, approaching the table with a pitcher in one hand and a glass in the other. Watching her, Naruto grins when she uses her sand to help her reach the high cabinet. He's seen her do so much with her ability to manipulate the sand around her, and to him the only limit to her ability is her creativity. He'd love to be able to do it too, but Gaara told him that only she can do it and she seems to have a complex about the whole thing. Well, Mom said that the people of the village have been talking badly about her for years, calling her a monster. Since only she can move the sand, it makes sense that she would be sensitive about it. Her ability to control the sand is the reason the people of the village think she's a monster. Approaching the table, Gaara sets the pitcher down before setting the glass down next to it. Raising the pitcher, Gaara gently pours water into the glass, setting the pitcher down before carrying the glass with both hands toward her older brother, handing it to him. "Thanks, Gaara-chan." Naruto smiles at her, taking the proffered glass gingerly. Raising the glass to his lips, Naruto takes a long drink from the glass, downing half the water in the glass before he sets it down on the table with a sigh. Taking the seat perpendicular to his, Gaara watches him, her green eyes cautious and careful. "Thanks, Gaara-chan, it was a really good idea to take a break. I didn't even know how exhausted I was until I sat down." "You have to be careful, Naruto-kun." Gaara politely admonishes him. "The desert is a harsh and unforgiving place. If you weren't careful you could collapse from dehydration." "I know," Naruto says, gulping down more water. Reaching out, Gaara gently raises the pitcher and refills Naruto's glass for him. The entire time the blonde boy watches as his younger adopted sister refills his glass. "You know you don't have to do that, Gaara-chan," Naruto says gently, smiling as Gaara finishes filling the glass. "I don't mind, Naruto-kun." Gaara answers him, setting the pitcher down on the table again. For her part, the red-haired Jinchuriki is just happy to have people other than her uncle that don't treat her like a monster. Kushina even knows her secret and just doesn't care. She's only been with the Uzumaki family for barely a week and she already feels like a member of the family. She doesn't feel ostracized or out of place, unlike when she was with her uncle or the rest of her family. Taking another drink from his refilled glass, Naruto sighs, leaning back in the chair. He doesn't really know how to interact with girls his age, his only real experience with other kids is at the park and most of the time he spent there was playing with other boys. That isn't to say there aren't girls his age there, it's just at their age girls tend to play with other girls and boys play with other boys. Not that he minds having Gaara around. He doesn't understand why someone as nice and gentle as her could possibly be such an outcast. He's never had a problem making friends, the other kids at the park never made him feel like he didn't belong or he was a monster. Kushina had a rough time at first, she was looked at as a foreigner and it wasn't until years had passed that suspicions about her were put to rest or at least taken behind closed doors rather than right in front of them. "Are you going to keep working, Naruto-kun?" Gaara asks and the blonde boy's lips part in an easygoing grin. "Yeah, I want to get this jutsu mastered as quickly as possible. The sooner I learn the sooner I can work on creative ways to use it." Smiling, Gaara giggles at Naruto's earnest response. "I'll do what I can to help you, okay Naruto-kun?" "Thanks, Gaara-chan. If you ever need my help, just let me know." Walking down the streets of the village, Kushina holds a leather bag in her right hand, said bag filled with groceries to feed her family. Rather than carry the bags in disposable plastic or paper bags, each member of the sand uses a reusable bag to conserve resources. It's been 3 days since she first showed Naruto the first step to learning the Rasengan, and so far her son has managed to burn through a grand total of 73 water balloons, trying to complete the first step. Thankfully no one has noticed. In the sand there are strict water use regulations, and using water from the village's aquifer to create a bunch of water balloons for her son to break trying to learn a jutsu is a major no-no. Fortunately she didn't need to tap into the village's aquifer to get the water, but her neighbors wouldn't know that, so they're just as likely to report her to the village government as they are to look the other way. Ironically, since Kushina didn't get the water from the aquifer, it's actually a good thing that the water is ultimately draining into the ground, filling the aquifer rather than draining off of it. Passing a shop, Kushina stops and looks up at the simple sign over the door new to the red-haired Uzumaki. She's been in the village for years and has learned the name of every business in the village, and she's never heard of any shop called Ama's Antiquities. What in the world is that? Approaching the store, the building is like nearly every other commercial building in the village. It's made of sandstone and is the same sand yellow color as nearly every other structure in the village. Kushina hadn't picked the village for its varied color palette. Pushing the door open, a low jingle resonates throughout the store as the door gently strikes a bell hanging inside the establishment. Inside the store is dark compared to the harsh sunlight outside. It's well lit and shelves line the walls with various display pieces on them. Surrounding the door in a U-shape is a glass display case. Looking around, Kushina recognizes some of the objects for sale as old archaeological pieces from Konoha, and even a few cups and dishes emblazoned with the whirlpool symbol. Unfortunately, the objects are probably fakes. When the whirlpool village was destroyed, countless people tried to cash in on the tragedy by creating historic pieces of the lost village, trying to sell it to collectors or anyone interested. "Hello?" Kushina calls out, her green eyes panning the walls slowly, the Uzumaki woman searching for a proprietor or whoever is watching the store. "Ah. A customer." A familiar voice comes through the doorway leading into the private area of the store. "That can't be." Standing there, Kushina watches as a man in his 40s walks through the open doorway. He's dressed in a black vest and black slacks with a white shirt underneath the black vest. He's bald with a ring of dark hair above his ears and a pair of glasses on his face. To Kushina, he looks more like a bartender rather than a respectable store owner. "Can I help you, young lady?" the man asks, his voice eerily familiar to Jiraiya's. Looking around cautiously, Kushina warily watches the man, a nagging suspicion that the man behind the counter is somehow connected to Jiraiya forming in her mind. "I've never noticed this store before. How long have you been open?" Kushina asks curiously, approaching the glass display case with her grocery bag in hand. "Actually, I just opened." the man answers with a smile. "You have the honorable distinction of being my first customer. What exactly is it that you sell?" "Find collectibles from all over the elemental lands." the man answers with a grin. "I've spent years creating connections all over the world, and I've used them to assemble a unique collection of valuable pieces from all over the world. So you come to the Sand Village of all places to do business? Wouldn't a place like this be better suited to a place like the Leaf? I've always admired this village." the man answers with a shrug. "It's easy to live in a forest or someplace with ample water, but to live in the desert takes fortitude and a resolve that not many people possess." "I suppose so." Kushina half-heartedly agrees, her eyes dropping to the glass case, slowly examining the items inside. Inside the case, a familiar shape catches her eye. Looking closer, Kushina recognizes the familiar shape of Tri-kunai, the same kind her husband used to act as markers for his teleportation jutsu. The knife rests in a red felt-hinged wooden display case. Squinting, Kushina examines the knife, her eyes bulging at the sight of the symbols drawn onto the square handle. "That's..." Her head snapping up, Kushina reaches out, grasping the man behind the counter by the collar, pulling him toward her, glaring into his eyes. "Where did you get that kunai?" Kushina demands, her left finger pointing down toward the knife. The man's eyes flicker down toward the display case and then up again, an uneasy chuckle escaping her lips. "That?" he asks curiously. "Yuma man came to me not too long ago and told me that it was a keepsake from one of his students. He sold it to me really cheap, saying that it is one of kind and he just wanted to part with it. Sell it to me." Kushina growls. "Whatever you paid for it, I'll buy it." Standing there, his dark eyes look into hers, a slow, uncomfortable laugh escaping his lips. "Since you're my first customer, how about I just give it to you?" he offers, and Kushina blinks in surprise, opening her death grip on the man's collar. Stepping back, the man rubs at his neck, slowly moving his head left and right to test his neck muscles. "You'll just give it to me, for free?" Kushina asks warily. Nodding, the man sighs reluctantly. "You're my inaugural customer, and that knife obviously means a great deal to you. It belonged to my late husband." "Thank you," Kushina says curtly. Kneeling down, the clerk removes the kunai and its display case from the glass display case before setting it down in front of Kushina. With the case open, Kushina looks down at the kunai, getting a clear view of the kunai. "It's his, no doubt about it. You know, the man who sold me that knife said the one who made it was a seal master, so good that he could even seal ink inside a scroll and encode it so that only certain people could read it. Sealing a message inside a scroll and keying the seal to a particular person's chakra. That would be incredibly useful as a means of keeping information secret, but something like that can't be an easy task to accomplish, and it only works for written information." "It's informative," Kushina answers quietly, looking at the man curiously. "Why would he tell me that? Is he trying to say that there's more to Minato's scroll than I thought there was?" Closing the box, Kushina looks down at it a moment, running her hand over the smooth, darkly stained wood. "Is there anything else you'd like?" the clerk asks curiously, Kushina quickly shaking her head no. "No, thank you, this is more than enough." Slipping the box into her bag, Kushina turns away from the shopkeeper and strides toward the door, the Uzumaki woman walking out of the shop and heading back toward her home. Immediately stepping outside, Kushina is greeted by the harsh, unforgiving desert sun, a scowl splitting her lips. Having grown up in a temperate climate, she'd gotten used to rain and a more moderate temperature. Unfortunately for her, the desert is dry and hot, a stark contrast to the whirlpool village of her youth and the leaf of her young adulthood. I have to get home, check and see if there's more to that scroll. Maybe Minato Chakra encoded a message for me or something else altogether. Watching Kushina Uzumaki leave, the man called Gama grins, a hearty chuckle escaping his lips. Still the same old hot-blooded habanero, aren't you, Kushi-chan? Gama asks, his voice changing, an exact match for Jiraiya of the Sannin. I'm not going to give up that easy, Kushina. Even if I can't be directly involved, I'm going to make up for what I've done. It's the least I can do after the mistakes I've made. Entering her home, Kushina quickly moves to the kitchen, setting the wooden kunai case on the kitchen counter before she unloads her groceries. Moving quickly, the red-haired Uzumaki woman can hear Naruto out in her backyard, probably toiling away trying to burst a water balloon using his chakra alone. A quick glance in the sink shows an unwashed glass, no doubt the result of Gaara convincing Naruto to take a break before he collapses from dehydration. The last few days Naruto has been working from the moment he wakes up to dinner time, trying to master the first stage of the Rasengan. Before she'd gotten pregnant, Minato had begun to teach it to her, and she'd already gone through the 3 stages necessary but never bothered to actually use it. But the Uzumaki Kekkei Genkai combined with her abnormal chakra reserves, she's already a powerful shinobi, and with what resides in Naruto, Kushina knows that sooner or later the leaf is going to demand that Naruto be returned to them, and the reason why he is so valuable. Kushina doesn't know what's going to happen once the Kazekage realizes what resides inside Naruto. The Kyuubi is the most powerful of all the Bijuu, and if the Kazekage was willing to sacrifice his wife to turn his second daughter into a Jinchuriki, then she can't even begin to imagine what he'll do to her to ensure Naruto's service to the sand. I guess that's one thing that bastard Sarutobi has been good for. He's kept the leaf from running their mouths, and no one has tried to infiltrate the village and assassinate Naruto to try and get rid of the Jinchuriki. Sighing, Kushina closes the cabinets and the refrigerator, setting her bag aside before she opens the wooden kunai case, admiring the knife inside. Reaching out, Kushina gingerly grasps the weapon and holds it up, examining the rectangular handle with Minato's teleportation tag drawn on it. Looking at the odd kunai, Minato had dozens of them in their home, that is until the Kyuubi destroyed it and shattered everything she had. To think, this might be the last one of these in existence. If it is, it's my duty to give it to Naruto as a keepsake from his father. If I had even the foggiest idea how to perform the Hiraishin, then I would use this as base and create my own. Shaking her head, Kushina gently returns the knife to the case, closing the wooden case on its hinge. Grasping the case with both hands, Kushina walks away from the counter, heading for the back door. Stopping at the door, Kushina puts her shoes back on before she steps outside, closing the door behind her to ensure that any blown sand stays outside. Looking around, Kushina immediately takes in the sight of Naruto standing in the middle of the yard, water balloon in hand, his face contorted in concentration. Near the door on her right, Gaara sits with her back against the house, Gaara's emerald eyes watching Naruto with her ever-present teddy bear held against her chest. How many balloons today? Kushina asks in a hushed whisper, keeping her voice down so she doesn't disturb Naruto's concentration. 13 so far. Gaara answers with a slight smile. Sighing, Kushina shakes her head, holding the kunai case close to her chest, her dark eyes looking out toward her son. Minato, he's just as stubborn as me when I set my mind to something. I think that he'll manage to master it in time. If he's anything like you, he'll be a surprise genius, and with the Kyuubi inside him he'll be a powerhouse. Well, I'll have to make more for tomorrow then. Kushina smiles at her adopted daughter. There's something I have to check, will you keep an eye on him, make sure he doesn't kill himself? Yes, Aka-san. Gaara answers with a smile, and Kushina returns the smile, the Uzumaki woman relieved that Gaara is still a somewhat well-adjusted little girl. After everything that's happened to her, walking toward the shed, Kushina goes inside, closing the door behind her before she flips on the light. Once again her work shed is revealed to her, the simple but functional space more than enough for her to do the work that keeps her roof over her head and food on the table. Approaching the work table, Kushina sets the case down, opening it and looking at the kunai again before she pushes it off to the side. Reaching down, the Uzumaki woman opens the drawer she left Minato's scroll in, grasping it and setting it down on the table before she closes the drawer. Unrolling the scroll, Kushina carefully rolls the front up, allowing her to reveal the entirety of the scroll on the table and not fold it up or rip it. Looking down at the blank expanse of paper, Kushina sighs, the realization that this whole venture is based solely on a hunch not lost on her. However, if she's right, if there is more to this scroll than just the instructions on how to teach the Rasengan, then it's possible that Minato could have written down how to perform the Hiraishin, and if he did and she was able to master it, she would become a very valuable asset to the Kazekage and probably create a new reputation as another Flash. Plus, if she can master it then Naruto can too. By rights Naruto deserves to at least have the option of learning the jutsu. More than anyone else he deserves to know it, as Minato's legacy it is his rightful place to become the second Yellow Flash. Putting her hands together, Kushina sighs before she molds her chakra, her hands glowing a faint pink with her chakra. Thanks to the Kyuubi's long-time presence in her body, her chakra has gone from the normal blue color to a shade of blue-pink, a combination of the demon's red and her natural blue. Opening her hands Kushina places her palm flat against the blank expanse of scroll in front of her, forcing the chakra into the paper. Watching as the paper absorbs the energy Kushina sees black text spread out from her hand like a wave, her eyes bulging out of their sockets at the sight of what is written there. Oh my. Chapter 7. 1 week later. Thank you for accepting this request for an audience on such short notice Kazekage-sama. Kushina offers from one knee, her head lowered in supplication. Behind his veil the Kazekage smiles. Seeing other people treating him like the living god he is always pleases him. Plus, he can still remember when Kushina came to this village and she was nothing more than a foreigner. Even though through the years she's managed to cut a niche for herself in the village, to many she's still nothing but a dirty red-haired foreigner. Kushina for her part is dressed in her normal civilian attire, though she has several kunai concealed underneath her clothing. It's been 7 days since she learned about the hidden text on Minato's scroll and has spent the last week poring over the text and learning from it. The two of them are alone in the Kazekage's private meeting chamber. Kushina had been explicit in asking for a private audience, and with the Kazekage's confidence, he never thought for even a moment that Kushina might try and kill him. What is it you wish to speak about, Uzumaki Kushina? The Kazekage asks curtly, his patience for the red-haired Uzumaki woman thin to begin with. As you are already aware, I was once married to the 4th Hokage of the Leaf, Minato Namikaze Kushina begins, and behind his veil the Kazekage huffs in annoyance. My time is precious Uzumaki Kushina. The Kazekage cuts her off with annoyance coloring his tone. You would do best by getting to the point and not reminding me of your former relationship to one of this village's most despised enemies. Of course. Kushina mentally kicks herself. I'm used to talking about Minato like he's a hero, but in this place he's one of the worst villains ever. He was called the Yellow Flash because of his ability to transport nearly instantaneously from point to point. Obviously. The Kazekage grumbles in annoyance. What is your point? Slowly reaching into her sleeve Kushina grasps a kunai there and slowly withdraws it. Pulling it out slowly, Kushina reveals a 3-pronged kunai very similar to the same weapon Minato used as anchor points for his teleportation jutsu. On close examination though this kunai is slightly different. The mark on the hilt that serves as an anchor is different than the ones used by Minato. As every person's chakra is different and the marks that are created by channeling chakra will create a different mark for each individual tat does it. This mark happens to be the symbols for Kushina's name in black against the white steel handle. What is that? The Kazekage asks pointedly, nodding toward the knife in Kushina's right hand. Please take this Kazekage-sama and everything will be made clear. Kushina explains stoically, setting the knife down on the floor and sliding it across the floor toward the village leader. Watching the knife stop in front of him the Kazekage carefully reaches out and picks the weapon up by its hilt. Raising the weapon to his face the Kazekage carefully examines the writing on the square hilt, recognizing the symbols for Kushina's name. What is the point of this? The Kazekage asks pointedly. Standing up straight Kushina looks through the veil toward the village leader. Just hold on to that knife Kazekage-sama and everything will be clear. Kushina insists evenly. Closing her eyes the red-haired woman disappears in the blink of an eye. Looking at it the Kazekage has a half moment to realize the woman is gone when a blade suddenly presses against his throat. Out of nowhere Kushina is behind him with yet another tri-kunai's tip pressed against his throat. In front of him the Kazekage has a veil that hangs down to mere centimeters above the floor. The reason for the veil is twofold. The first being that it separates him from the commoners of the village, adding an air of authority to his position. Second of all the veil acts as a defensive barrier. If someone were to body flicker through the veil will move and the Kazekage will know to move, allowing him to avoid the assassin's blade coming for his throat. However in this latest instance the veil didn't move even a millimeter. A scant moment passed from when she disappeared to the moment the blade was pressed against her throat. Even a body flicker would have taken a moment for the shinobi to travel and turn, this had been instant. This is. The Kazekage mumbles carefully, making sure to keep his throat from pushing against the blade in Kushina's hand. I've mastered my husband's jutsu, the Hiraishin. Kushina says coldly. Thanks to it I now hold your life in my hand. I can see that. The Kazekage offers amicably. I assume you have some reason for this demonstration. Nodding, Kushina pulls the knife away from the Kazukiya's throat, slipping the three-bladed weapon back into her sleeve, sliding the knife into its appropriate sheath against her left forearm. The Uzumaki woman stepping back closer to the wall behind the Kazukiya. With this jutsu I can grant this village the power of the yellow flash, now forever lost to Konoha. I assume this power would come at a price. The Kazukiya half asks, speaking over his right shoulder toward the red-haired Uzumaki woman. I won't teach you or anyone outside of my family the secret to this jutsu. Kushina explains evenly. This technique is to remain secret to me and my family. Like many other hidden villages, there are several families within the sand that have techniques that are kept a secret amongst that specific clan within the village and not shared with the whole. These secret clan techniques are often the foundation for their loyalty to their village. The clan brings their technique to the service of the village, and in return the village offers protection and belonging for a group of people that would otherwise be hunted down and eliminated. So long as it guarantees your service to this village, that is a small price to pay. The Kazukiya answers her evenly. It's better to have this power than not have it at all. When my children graduate the academy, I want to be their teacher. Kushina continues her demands. Naruto is my son and there is much I have to teach him. I don't want my teachings taking backseat to the instructions of another shinobi with no idea what his abilities are. Your children? The Kazukiya asks pointedly. Gaara is my daughter, it is my blood that flows in her veins, not yours. You would never know it from the way you treated her, you heartless prick. As much as Kushina may want to give voice to her thoughts, the red-haired Uzumaki holds her tongue. Disrespecting the village leader now won't accomplish anything, and while it may make her feel good in the moment, in the long run she'll suffer for it. Gaara-chan is my child as much as Naruto. Kushina responds stubbornly. There is more to what makes a family than blood. That is a noble intention, Uzumaki, but your son is a member of this village, and Gaara is to be a shinobi. The reason she was allowed into your care is because you agreed that she would willingly become a shinobi for the sake of protecting the village, rather than feeling as though she must. If you cannot fulfill that bargain, then she will be placed into foster care as a ward of the village. Gaara will be a fine shinobi. Kushina counters evenly. Before I left the Leaf I was a jounin. That fact has not changed in the years since I came here. Then you wish for me to instate you as jounin in the service of this village and allow you to teach not one but two Jinchuriki. Standing there, Kushina narrows her eyes toward the Kazukiya in front of her. She hadn't told the Kazukiya that Naruto was a Jinchuriki, hasn't told anyone beyond Gaara. How the Kazukiya could know that Naruto is a host is beyond her. How do you know that? Kushina asks coldly, and behind his veiled hat the Kazukiya smiles. Did you honestly think that we wouldn't know? The Kazukiya asks coldly. Your son is the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the most powerful Biju. Our spies knew the day after it happened that the demon was sealed into your child. When we came here we knew what you had swaddled in your arms. So that's the reason you allowed me to stay here. Because my son is a Jinchuriki. You were a shinobi from an enemy village, retired or not. The Kazukiya counters. Were you not in possession of the Jinchuriki you would have been killed or turned away at the gate. Then why haven't you told everyone? Kushina asks coldly. The entire village knows that Gaara is a Jinchuriki, so why not do the same for Naruto? Gaara has harmed people, intentional or not. The Kazukiya responds evenly. She controls sand and does not sleep, those traits set her apart from other children, and the sealing of the Ichibi into her was not a secret. Your son exhibits none of these traits and for all intents and purposes appears normal. No one has reason to suspect him, unlike Gaara. So why not kill me? Kushina asks astutely. You wanted Naruto, why not just kill me and take him? You came in the company of one of the Sannin. The Kazukiya offers. Had we tried to kill you, the lives of several shinobi would have been lost, and there's no guarantee that you were the Sannin, wouldn't have killed your own child or taken it away to prevent us from getting our hands on him. Alright then. Kushina agrees slowly. What about my demands? I'll maintain control of the Hiraishin, and I will be Naruto and Gaara's teacher when they graduate the Shinobi Academy. Sitting there, the Kazukiya mulls over the decision. With the yellow flash on their side, the Leaf nearly annihilated the Cloud, and Minato was lauded as a hero within the Leaf and a public enemy in every other village. His name was placed into every other village's bingo book along with a picture, and in some cases a flea on side order was issued. With that same ability and two Jinchuriki, the Sand's military power could increase significantly. However, now that Kushina has this power, there's no guarantee that she won't use it to take her children and flee, and if she's capable of teleporting outside the village, then there's very little the village could do to stop her. I agree to your conditions. The Kazukiya assents and Kushina solemnly nods, holding out her hand toward the Kazukiya, palm up. Return that kunai please. Kushina asks politely. It takes more than a tagged kunai to figure out how to use the Hiraishin, and without me your chances of gleaming the knowledge are zero. Here. The Kazukiya says, holding the knife out by the loop for Kushina to take. Carefully the red-haired Uzumaki woman takes the knife from the Kazukiya's finger, slipping it into her clothes and concealing it. The day Naruto graduates from the academy you are to come here to be formally inducted into military service for the village. The Kazekage explains for Kushina. Once that's done you will be made the Jounin instructor for Uzumaki Naruto, Uzumaki Gaara and a third, as of yet undetermined student. You will do whatever missions are given to you and you will follow orders without question, is that clear? Of course. Kushina answers matter-of-factly. Is there anything else for us to discuss? No. The Kazekage answers curtly. This audience is over. Thank you, Kazekage-sama. Kushina offers with a half-bow. Once the motion is done the red-haired Uzumaki woman disappears into thin air. Sitting there the Kazekage watches her disappear, the veil in front of him remaining motionless. Show off foreigner, yes. Naruto's enthusiastic victory cry echoes throughout the neighborhood. Naruto-kun. Standing in the backyard with Naruto the red-haired Gaara scolds her adopted younger brother. It's been over a week since Kushina began to teach Naruto the Rasengan, and the blonde-haired Uzumaki has just now learned to pop the balloon using his chakra. Standing there Naruto's hands are both wet, bits and pieces of balloon littered around in front of him. The two of them are both dressed in their normal clothes, Gaara clutching her precious teddy bear to her chest. In spite of his younger sister's words the blonde-haired Uzumaki can't help but grin a wide, victorious grin. He's spent over a week popping balloon after balloon, and after over 100 balloons, he's just finally gotten his chakra control to the point where he can spin it fast enough to burst a balloon, rather than just pop it. From the house the door opens, and Kushina pokes her head out. She left to speak to the Kazekage first thing that morning, and got back over an hour prior. She made them both lunch, and once that was done Naruto went straight back to work on trying to burst a balloon. You finally managed to burst the balloon? Kushina half asks, and Naruto nods, his grin never faltering as he jogs toward his mother. I did it, I really did it. Naruto insists. Gaara-chan saw me and everything. Chuckling Kushina waves her hand dismissively. Walking up behind them Gaara silently watches the entire scene play out. This is her family, and she's happy just to be here and feel like she belongs rather than as an outcast. Okay, I believe you. Kushina assures her young son. I take it you want to learn what the second step is? Yes. Naruto screams the word, his hands balled together in front of his chest, the blonde-haired boy practically shaking out of his skin with excitement. 1 second Naruto. Kushina assures him, closing the door and stepping back inside. The two of them look at one another, both Naruto and Gaara, curious as to what Kushina is going to go retrieve. Together the two of them wait in silence for a few moments before the door opens, and Kushina emerges holding a blue rubber ball about the same size as the balloons she made for Naruto. Here. Kushina offers, handing the blue ball toward Naruto. The rubber ball? Naruto asks curiously, taking the proffered ball and looking at it in his right hand, slowly rotating the sphere to examine it. Yes Naruto, a rubber ball. Kushina explains as she steps outside, closing the door behind her. Now that you've learned to spin your chakra violently enough to pop a water balloon, you have to learn to do the same thing with a rubber ball filled only with air. Air is thinner than water and requires a denser more powerful chakra to break it. So, I just have to break this rubber ball the same way I broke the balloon. Naruto asks, scratching the back of his head while looking between the ball and his mother. It will be much harder to break than the balloon. Kushina informs him. Since you've got the basic principle down now all you have to do is just get better at it until you can destroy the ball. It shouldn't take as long as it did to pop to the balloon, so just keep at it and you'll get it in no time. Got it? Naruto agrees, giving his mother a thumb up. I swore that I'm going to have this technique mastered by the time I start the academy, and I meant it. But that the young Uzumaki boy turns around and heads back into the yard, both the red-haired Jinchuriki and former Jinchuriki, watching the young blonde go. Once Naruto is back in his former spot in the yard, the blonde boy immediately goes to work on trying to destroy the rubber ball. Do you honestly think it won't take him as long Aka-san? Gaara asks curiously, and Kushina smiles, crossing her arms over her chest, her eyes fixated on her son diligently working to master one of his father's techniques. Of course. Kushina agrees easily, turning her gaze to the insomniac Jinchuriki. You know, I know a lot of different jutsu, and if you want I could teach you one or two. Your sand powers are useful, but you shouldn't ever put your faith in just one thing. If you somehow are ever cut off from your sand or someone finds a way to neutralize that power, you should have some other means of fighting. Would you? The red-haired girl asks scandalously. No one has ever wanted to teach her before. For as long as she can remember people have always thought she was dangerous enough as it is. No one has ever wanted to make her stronger or try to help her improve. The best she'd ever gotten had been Yashimaru, and he'd only taken care of her and treated her like he actually cared a little, rather than just as a burden. Of course. Kushina answers casually, favoring her little girl with a smile. You're my child and being a shinobi is dangerous. I want you to live a long happy life, so I'm going to do whatever I can to help you and make sure that you aren't killed. Thank you Aka-san. Gara whispers, her eyes dropping to the sand at her feet, slowly writhing back and forth. Uncrossing her arms, Kushina reaches out and puts her left hand on Gara's head, the Uzumaki woman playfully ruffling the younger girl's hair. Feeling Kushina's hand on her head, Gara instinctively pulls away, her hair already ruffled in spite of her attempt to prevent it. "Don't worry about it," Kushina assures the girl, Gara removing one hand from her bear to reach up and run her hands through her hair to try and smooth it. Sitting in the Kazukiya's office, the cage of the village hidden in the sand has assembled in front of him his most trusted advisors and top shinobi. Each and every one of the men and women in front of him has proven their loyalty to not only the village, but to him countless times over and over again. Amongst the entire sand military there are no other people the Kazukiyage trusts more. "You summoned us all, Kazukiyage-sama?" His advisor Kazuto asks curiously. When he'd summoned them he intentionally left out the reason why. The information he intends to share with them is something that he wants kept secret. If this information were to get out and make its way back to the Leaf, it could start a war. "Yes, I did," the Kazukiyage assures them all. "What I'm about to tell you all is to be considered an S-class secret and to never leave this room, am I absolutely clear?" Slowly looking around the room, the various heads all nod their agreement. In each of their faces the Kazukiyage can see curiosity and guarded interest. For all of them to be assembled, whatever he has to say must be important, and to insist that it is an S-rank secret only further confirms that. With bated breath, each of the Kazukiyage's most trusted allies and subordinates waits for their leader to inform them of whatever secret he has gathered them all together to reveal. "I recently acquired the power of the yellow flash," the Kazukiyage explains slowly, his voice even and completely serious. Hearing his words, several of the assembled shinobi and government officials glance toward one another. Looking around the room, the Kazukiyage cannot miss the obvious questions being silently exchanged between the assembled men and women. What is he talking about? Has he lost his mind? Kazukiyage-sama, Kazuto begins slowly, his voice filled with respect and admiration. "I'm afraid that you must elaborate. Not even the Leaf has been able to replicate that power, so how is it that you've acquired it?" "How I acquired the power is not important, what is important is this. The village now has someone with the same capability of the yellow flash." "Someone?" Hitomi, his only female advisor, speaks up. "Who are you talking about?" Slowly looking around the room from behind his veil, the Kazukiyage of the village hidden in the sand can see that same question reflected in nearly every gaze looking back at him. "At the moment this person is not in service to the village, however I procured their services for the near future. You will all be informed immediately once they have become an active shinobi. Once that happens, one can finally bring the downfall of that accused upstart village once and for all." Hearing the anticipation in his voice, each of the assembled men and women nod their understanding of the Kazukiyage's statement. "Of course, Kazukiyage-sama." 4 days later. "Ha!" Gara lets out a martial arts yell, thrusting the kunai held in her right hand out into the training dummy in front of her. Behind her, Naruto clutches a rubber ball in both hands, his 6-year-old face screwed up in concentration. For the last 4 days Naruto has been constantly trying to master the second stage of learning whatever jutsu Kushina is trying to teach him. Like the balloon, Naruto has easily managed to poke a hole in the side of the ball, but so far has been unable to burst it into several little pieces. Since Naruto has been constantly training in his new jutsu, Kushina decided to teach Gara a new technique as well. Due to the Uzumaki woman's proficiency for wind element jutsu, Kushina began to instruct her in what Kushina referred to as a basic technique. Said basic technique involves using wind chakra as a blade, molding the chakra around a weapon or her hand to create an elemental blade capable of cutting steel. At its most basic level, Kushina explained that the jutsu can be used to extend the length of a weapon's blade by a few centimeters, allowing for a near miss to actually inflict a cut and cause the opponent to bleed. As mastery of the technique increases, the length of the blade along with the amount of chakra required to create and maintain it increases. Since the technique requires a target to be practiced upon, Kushina has put together 4 humanoid training dummies and set them up in the backyard, telling Gara to use them as practice for mastering the wind blade. Thus, the young red-haired Jinchuriki now stands in front of one of said dummies, stabbing a kunai given to her by Kushina repeatedly into said dummy. Thunk. Once again the blade penetrates halfway into the wooden dummy, the opposite side of the human-sized target completely unaffected by the strike. If she'd perfected the technique, it would have been as though she'd stabbed all the way through the wooden target. Instead, Gara's chakra blade barely caused any additional damage to the wood at all. Giving the knife a tug, Gara pulls the kunai from the dummy, inspecting the hole created by the weapon. Like nearly every other hole in the wooden statue, the wound is what it looks like when you stab into a wooden block with a sharp knife. The first day Kushina had performed the jutsu for her as a demonstration, shoving the very same kunai Gara holds in her right hand into one of the dummies and stabbing a hole clean through to the other side. Oh, a depreciated sigh escapes the red-haired girl's lips, self-pity welling up inside the 6-year-old Jinchuriki. "I've been at this for days and I've hardly made any improvement. maybe learning this was a mistake. My sand powers are really strong and almost nothing can hurt me. You're doing good, Gara-chan. Kushina speaks from behind her, the red-haired Uzumaki woman's words are encouragement, as though the former leaf shinobi can sense her adopted daughter's thoughts. But Gara protests quietly, looking over her right shoulder toward her adopted mother-turned-teacher. No buts. Kushina cuts her off. When I learned this jutsu it took me over a week and you're already making more progress on it than I did. Really? Gara asks quietly, and the Uzumaki woman nods encouragingly, smiling at her adopted child. Really? Kushina insists, stepping forward and kneeling down next to Gara to examine the wounds left on the wooden dummy. Looking at the remains with a critical eye, Kushina nods approvingly. In spite of Gara's apparent lack of progress, she has in fact been improving. At first glance one would hardly notice, save if they were looking for it. With each thrust the section of target cut away has been gradually increasing, both in depth and in width. Though the progress may be minuscule, in the world of shinobi one hardly ever learns by leaps and bounds without some form of assistance, be it a Kekkei Genkai or whatever method, learning a jutsu from scratch does not happen overnight. Aka-san. Gara whispers quietly, her green eyes large, her voice tinged with the beginnings of fear. Standing there watching Kushina closely examine her handiwork in utter silence, Gara can't help but feel apprehensive, like she's being judged condemned for her apparent lack of progress. You're actually doing really well, Gara-chan. Kushina assures the little girl standing next to her. Really? Gara whispers scandalously, the concept of receiving positive encouragement still relatively new to the red-haired Jinchuriki. Really? Kushina parrots the word, her voice strong and sure. With each attempt the amount of damage you're inflicting on the target is increasing, and with enough practice, you'll be able to stab the target and run it through using the chakra blade. Just keep working on it and you'll get it. I'm actually very proud of you. Standing there, Gara's green eyes go as wide as a large bowl of ramen. She's proud of me. No one, not her father, not her siblings, not even her uncle has ever said that to her and meant it. She's heard the word several times before, but every time they were showy and fake, they weren't real. Tears at the edges of her eyes, Kushina blinks in surprise at the sight of them. Immediately the Uzumaki woman turns her full attention toward her daughter, concern etching her brow and overflowing in her dark eyes. Why are you crying, Gara-chan? Kushina asks softly, keeping her voice down to spare the girl the embarrassment of Naruto overhearing. The knife slips from numb fingers, landing in the sand with a thunk. Kushina quickly glances down, making sure the kunai didn't hurt Gara before her gaze snaps up, immediately returning to her adopted daughter. No one has ever said that to me before, Gara whispers fragilely, her gaze dropping to the ground in embarrassment. Immediately and without second thought Kushina wraps her arms around the red-haired girl, pulling her close and comforting her, whispering into the little girl's ear. It's all right, Kushina soothes, feeling the patter of Gara's tears against her blouse. It'll be okay, Gara-chan, I promise. Chapter 8. 1 week later. Ha! Thunk. Watching the kunai fly, Kushina stands behind Gara, watching the red-haired Jinchuriki throw the knife with perfect form, the steel weapon shimmering with wind chakra as it slices through the air. Seeing the knife strike the wooden target, Kushina can't see the splinters fly from the back of the wooden dummy, the knife jabbed into the target up to its heft, the blade nowhere near long enough to pierce the dummy completely. Kushina had taught her to use the kunai as a hand weapon, stabbing it into the target and using wind chakra to extend the blade. In just a week, however, Gara has not only learned to do that, but also to throw the kunai with wind chakra surrounding it, a much more advanced version of the technique. Turning back to face her adopted mother, the red-haired Jinchuriki looks unsure, a part of her sure that she's gotten the jutsu right, another part scared that she messed something up and did it wrong. But it isn't her fault that she thought about molding the wind chakra around the blade and then throwing it. When she'd first done it, the chakra blade had vanished after it left her hand, and she quickly found out that she had to mold much more chakra in order to sustain the blade in flight and still have the same cutting power. Once she'd figured that out, she went to Kushina and told her that she was finished training, and the red-haired Uzumaki had come out to see the results of Gara's training herself. Meeting her green eyes, Kushina nods approvingly, a slight smile coming to her lips as she approaches the young redhead. You did good, Gara-chan. Kushina praises the girl, a part of her surprised by the relatively short amount of time it took the 6-year-old to learn the jutsu and master it to the level she has. Relief washing over her, Gara smiles lightly, a part of her still not used to receiving praise. Thank you, Aka-san. Gara says quietly, her sand slowly swirling around her feet. Now Kushina begins slowly, walking toward the target and leaning over it, examining it. Following her adopted parent, Gara doesn't say anything as Kushina stares at the kunai still stuck in the wooden target a moment. Reaching out, the Uzumaki woman plucks the knife from the dummy, grabbing the weapon by its ring. Kushina quickly checks the blade before slipping it into a holster beneath her robes. Is everything alright, Aka-san? Gara squeaks, her voice barely above a whisper, fear and insecurity overflowing in her tone. Mentally smacking herself, Kushina stands up straight, half turning to face her daughter. The Uzumaki woman smiles disarmingly, trying to assuage her adopted daughter of whatever fears her mind has conjured. "Nothing's the matter, Gara-chan," Kushina says soothingly, facing the girl completely before kneeling down in front of her, looking the girl in the eyes. "Why would you think that?" Her voice isn't angry or upset, only curious, and the red-haired Jinchuriki looks down, her shoulders slouching in defeat, her voice coming out in a very low whisper. "Ekasebika," she trails, the words caught in her throat. She wants to say because people have always blamed her for things going wrong, even when she had nothing to do with what happened. As the daughter of the Kazekage, however, she wasn't someone anyone would brazenly attack in the street, and even if they were brave enough, her san protects her and has put 3 people in the hospital on its own. Frowning, Kushina places a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder, her voice coming out lightly as she speaks. "Things aren't always your fault, Gara-chan," Kushina says gently. "You're a good girl and you're a member of this family now. I don't know what happened to you in the past and what other people have told you, but you're just a little girl, you aren't a monster or a killer or anything like that unless you choose to be, okay?" Nodding quietly, the young Jinchuriki doesn't say anything, instead she steps forward, placing her head against her adopted mother's waist. "Thank you, Aka-san," Gara whispers, the girl stepping back a moment later before reaching up and wiping her eyes with her hand. Closing her eyes a moment, Kushina breathes in slowly, exhaling the cleansing breath, forcing herself to ignore the sudden desire to find whatever idiot decided to persecute this innocent girl and bash his brains in, as therapeutic as it might be. "Why don't we go check on Naruto?" Kushina asks, changing the subject. Nodding, the red-haired 6-year-old is glad for the change of focus. Being the target of so much animosity and hatred in her home village, Gara has grown fond of not being the center of attention. Before she'd been adopted into the Uzumaki family, she firmly wanted nothing more than to just disappear, that way people couldn't scorn her and she wouldn't be a bother to anyone. Now though, with Kushina and Naruto, things are different. She doesn't know what to call what she feels when Kushina smiles at her, or what she's feeling when the 3 of them sit down together to dinner and just have a normal conversation. She'd never gotten that before. When she'd been living with Yashimaru, he'd fed her, but the meals had always been silent, and the few times she did speak, Yashimaru would only respond with short, concise answers or non-committal grunts. Walking with Kushina to the rear of the yard, Naruto stands there, clutching a rubber ball in his hands, his face screwed up in concentration, glaring at the ball with a look that could melt the rubber in his hands. His palm's glowing blue chakra begins to spin inside the ball, Naruto focusing and using the most powerful chakra he can mold, spinning it around as fast as he can. Come on, Naruto mutters, the ball in his hand beginning to vibrate. Pop. The rubber ball explodes in his hand, and Naruto just stares at the rubber remains a moment, his blue eyes bulging out of his head in disbelief. Opening her mouth to congratulate her adopted brother, Naruto bends his knees, hopping into the air and thrusting his fist up toward the sky. "YSSSS." He shouts at the top of his lungs in joyous celebration. Closing her mouth, Gara pulls her head down toward her shoulders like a turtle, opting not to say anything after all. Watching Gara out of the corner of her eye, Kushina frowns internally at the sight of the red-haired girl, metaphorically closing herself off, opting rather to not say anything than to offer earnest congratulations. Landing on his feet after the short hop, Naruto turns around, opening his mouth to call out to Kushina, he stops mid-step, taking in the sight of the 2 Uzumaki looking back at him. "How long have you both been there?" Naruto asks with a hint of embarrassment in his voice. "Long enough to see you complete step 2. Kushina explains to her son. "Well, it took me long enough," Naruto trails, and Kushina shakes her head. "You did it quickly enough, you're only 6 years old, Naruto. When your father made this jutsu he was over 25 years old." Still, he trails, kicking the sand at his feet. Feeling a nudge at her back, Gara quickly looks up to see Kushina looking down at her expectantly, the Uzumaki matriarch looking at her and then Naruto, and then back again, her expression practically screaming, "Say something." Swallowing the saliva in her mouth, Gara looks toward Naruto, his eyes flickering back and forth between Gara and his mother, his blue gaze curious. Don't think you did that bad, Naruto-kun," Gara very nearly mutters, her gaze dropping to the sand. "It took me over a week to learn what your Aka-san wanted to teach me." Listening to Gara, Kushina doesn't miss the way Gara refers to her. Rather than refer to Kushina as just Aka-san, she'd specifically said your Aka-san, implying that she doesn't view the red-haired Uzumaki as her mother, in spite of Kushina's insistence that they were family and she was Gara's mother, regardless of whom the girl's birth parents were. "I'll have to talk to her," Kushina thinks to herself. Blinking, Naruto cocks his head to the side curiously. "Aka-san taught you something?" Naruto asks, Gara quickly bobbing her head in affirmation. "What did she teach you?" The wind blade, Gara trails, not sure what else to say. "Huh?" Naruto asks, clueless as to what Gara is talking about. Until now, Kushina has been focusing Naruto on the basics of shinobi training, teaching him to control his chakra and physical exercise. As far as techniques go, the Rasengan is the first that Kushina intends to impart onto her child, but it isn't going to be the only one. Looking up at Kushina, Gaara's green eyes are pleading for Kushina to say something, but the red-haired Uzumaki doesn't say anything. Instead, she simply nods permissively toward Gaara, telling the young girl to explain it herself, the intention to at least get Gaara comfortable speaking to Naruto and being the center of attention. As it is now, the girl practically loathes it. It's done by molding wind chakra around a weapon or your hand, Toto make a cutting edge, Gaara explains, and Naruto's eyes seem to go wide in awe. Can you show me? Naruto asks emphatically, the red-haired girl slinking away from him slightly at the sudden outburst. That's enough, Kushina says evenly, stepping forward and pulling her son's attention toward her. She can show you after you learn the third step and master this jutsu. Right, Naruto agrees with a nod, focusing on his mother. What's the third step? Reaching into her pocket, Kushina withdraws an uninflated balloon, the red-haired woman raising it to her lips and blowing into it, inflating the balloon to roughly the size of a large ball, holding it out for Naruto. Another balloon? Naruto asks as a frown settles on his face. How do I have to pop it this time? Naruto takes the balloon from his mother, looking at it curiously as a smile trickles onto Kushina's face, the Uzumaki woman crossing her arms over her chest as she shakes her head no in denial. You don't pop this one. Kushina explains to him, eliciting a surprised blink from Naruto, his head snapping up to her with curiosity written on his features. I don't have to pop it? Naruto asks, and Kushina nods again. That's right. Kushina assures him. For this step, you have to combine what you learned in the first two steps to spin your chakra around inside the balloon without popping it. If you can do that, all you have to do is repeat the process without a balloon and you'll successfully perform the Rasengan. Cool, Naruto trails, looking down at the balloon held in his right hand. You'll doubtlessly pop a few before you manage to get the hang of it, so I'll get some more for you and bring them out. Kushina explains, turning toward the house. I'll help, Gaara speaks up, Kushina acknowledging the girl with a nod before the two red-haired Uzumaki head for the house. Kushina just reaches the door when she hears a loud pop from behind her, followed closely by Naruto grunting in frustration. I didn't think it would be that soon, Kushina mutters to herself, raising her voice as she continues. Give me a few minutes and I'll have some balloons for you. Okay. Naruto responds, Kushina looking over her shoulder to see her son looking down at the scattered remains of the red balloon Kushina had just given him. Suppressing a sigh, the Uzumaki woman heads into the house, followed closely by the young Gaara. Closing the door to the backyard, both Gaara and Kushina remove their shoes before entering the home proper, Kushina heading for the kitchen at an easy walk with Gaara behind her. Her footsteps light against the floorboards. Kushina walks to a kitchen cabinet, opening it and withdrawing a box of uninflated balloons, setting the box on the table and opening it before handing one to Gaara. Here, Kushina offers gently, Gaara taking the blue balloon with both hands and holding it to her lips. Blowing, Gaara slowly inflates the balloon, Kushina watching momentarily before taking her own balloon and inflating it, quickly tying it off and setting it on the table. They don't have to be really big. Kushina explains after finishing her own balloon. Just big enough so that they fit in your hand. Okay, Gaara mumbles, blowing more air into the balloon before tying it off. For a few minutes neither woman says anything, Gaara focusing on blowing another balloon, while Kushina quietly watches the girl out of the corner of her eye. Doing her best to look busy, Kushina blows a second balloon, placing it on the table before speaking, keeping her tone relaxed and casual. Are you feeling alright, Gaara-chan? Kushina asks, not wanting to alarm the girl. She's never heard of a Jinchuriki getting sick, and when she was the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki she never got sick and could heal practically any wound overnight. She doesn't know about the Ichibi, but most of the rumors about Jinchuriki don't paint them as the type that can get a head cold. I'm fine, Aka-san. Gaara says calmly, tying off her second balloon. The young girl doesn't look up at Kushina when she speaks, even after placing the balloon on the table. The 6-year-old just grabs another balloon and starts blowing again. Kushina, however, doesn't buy it. Are you sure? Kushina asks gently. If something is happening to you, I want to try and help. Her words are heartfelt and honest, and as Gaara finishes her third balloon and ties it off, the young girl speaks softly, placing the balloon on the table as she does. Do you hear a voice in my head? She trails. It says things. Like what? Kushina asks, kneeling down to place her eyes at Gaara's eye level, her gaze curious and comforting. Like that you aren't my real mother, she trails, her eyes dropping to the floor. It tells me that you and Naruto-kun are both going to leave me, that it is the only thing that won't leave me. Do you believe that? Kushina asks, Gaara looking up at her momentarily before looking down again. I don't want to, she admits quietly. Living with you and Naruto-kun has been so different from anything I've ever experienced, even with Uncle Yashimaru. I've told you, Gaara-chan. Kushina begins slowly, placing a gentle arm on the girl's shoulder. There's more to family than blood. Naruto and I are your family now, all that matters is right now, and I promise you, we aren't going to leave you. Looking up to Kushina, Gaara's voice is barely above a whisper. You promise? Nodding, Kushina gives the girl's shoulder a gentle squeeze. I promise. Clutching a balloon in his hand, Naruto's face is contorted in concentration, the Uzumaki boy struggling to create a stable rotation inside the balloon without blowing the thing apart. After spending weeks learning to burst balloons, it's rather difficult for him to not break the thing apart using his chakra now. Hama, Naruto mutters to himself, trying to focus the chakra rotating inside the balloon. Hop. Crap. Pieces of latex falling to the sand in front of him, Naruto groans in frustration. He's already gone through over 10 balloons in the last 2 hours, and he's starting to wonder whether or not he's going to be able to master this jutsu before he begins going to the academy in just over 2 months. A small column of sand rises next to him, Naruto blinking in momentary surprise before his attention snaps to the small column of sand and the bucket of balloons atop it rising to his shoulder level. Thanks, Gaara-chan. Naruto offers warmly, looking over his shoulder at the red-haired Jinchuriki standing there with one hand extended. Taking a balloon from the bucket slowly falling to ground level a moment later. You're welcome, Naruto-kun. Gaara says quietly, lowering her hand. Kushina had suggested that Gaara use her powers to help Naruto, raising the bucket to his shoulder level and then lowering it again. At first she'd wondered why Kushina would suggest the idea, but after doing it a few times Gaara has quickly grasped the idea. She's training my endurance, getting me used to using my powers for an extended period of time. Before being adopted by the Uzumaki family, Gaara never really had any positive opportunities to use her abilities. Having the power to manipulate sand, nearly everyone in the village was afraid of her, and if they saw her using her powers in public for any reason, it was likely to cause a riot. Now though, Kushina doesn't seem to care that Gaara has such a powerful ability, and neither does Naruto. Then there's the fact that he's another Jinchuriki, but he doesn't have any of the Samaishu she does. He can sleep, he doesn't present any sign that he even has a beast sealed inside him, other than the 3 whisker-like marks on his cheeks, and those are easily dismissible. The part of her was jealous, he can and does sleep, he doesn't hear voices in his head telling him unpleasant things that he doesn't want to hear. Before she thought her life as a Jinchuriki was the norm, but now that she's seen Naruto, she knows that her life might not be so normal after all. He doesn't love you, a very familiar voice whispers in her ears, barely audible. No one loves you, I am the only one who will be there for you. Knowing that whatever it is that's speaking is talking only to her, and Naruto or anyone else can't hear it, the young Gaara shuts her eyes and shakes her head no defiantly. No. She thinks with as much resolve as she can muster. That isn't true and I'm not going to listen to you. Akasan said. You really think she's your Akasan? The voice asks chidingly. She isn't. Your real Akasan died to turn you into a killer. No. Gaara denies again, Naruto completely unaware of the conversation happening between his adopted sister and her Biju, not 10 feet away from him, as he stares at the balloon in his hands, trying again to complete the last step in learning his mother's jutsu. There's more to family than blood. The Uzumakis have done more for me in a week than anyone else in my entire life. You're wrong about them, and I won't tolerate you talking badly about them. She can feel a trace of anger inside her at the beast's insinuation that it would say those things to her, to try and get her to turn away from the first people in her life, to treat her like a person, rather than a monster. But the voice whispers, offering nothing more as it recedes, Gaara waiting several moments for it to continue, but whatever presence the beast has inside her mind disappears, and she is once again alone with her thoughts. The only question for the young Jinchuriki is how long will that be so? The demon never leaves her alone for long. Hop. Son of a, Naruto yells in anger, Kushina's voice coming from inside the house, interrupting the blonde boy before he can finish his statement. Uzumaki Naruto. Kushina's scolding voice carries, and Naruto goes practically ramrod straight at the sound of his mother's voice. He knows what he was about to say, and he also knows that Kushina doesn't like him using words like that. He'd picked them up playing with other kids who'd heard them from their parents or from older children. Sorry. Naruto yelps in fear, the young Uzumaki suffering from a healthy dose of fear for his red-hot habanero former shinobi mother. Kushina doesn't say anything, and Naruto's shoulders visibly slouch in relief when Kushina chooses not to pursue the subject further. In his very short life, Naruto has learned the full extent of his mother's ability to torque his ear and make it feel like she's about to rip his ear off and not actually rip it off. The barrel next to him rising, Naruto pushes the early childhood memories aside, taking another balloon from the bucket before watching it slowly sink toward the ground. Back at it, what if Naruto has Sand Village inheritance? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.